Hey everyone. So, today we're going to be doing something kind of unique, actually. Something I haven't done in like ages. I don't believe I've had like a podcast style stream in quite a long time, which is what today's going to be. So, as usual, welcome everyone, Gray, Ali, and anyone else who will be joining us tonight. What we're going to be doing tonight is basically just we're going to be summarizing a few bits of the Higurashi franchise, specifically the first chapter that we just finished covering, and having a small discussion. Having a small discussion over the chapters, some theories that we might have, and that's about it. It'll be a nice little, nice little discussion of the Higurashi chapter 1 from the Onikakushi arc, which we just kind of finished covering. Today I'll be joined by two people. One is an actual streamer here on Twitch. His name is, he's Greycart. He's in chat right now. He goes by Billy. And another friend of ours, who their name is Nadia. So she's going to be joining us as well. And we're just going to be talking about Higurashi for quite a while. And yeah, it'll be fun. So I'll mention this as well for YouTube later. If you, of course, for some reason have not played Higurashi and you're watching this first, either go play it or read it, or if you're watching this video on YouTube later, the entire playthrough should be out, and this should be the bonus final video on the chapter 1 playlist. So I guess go watch that first, because we're gonna be spoiling basically the whole game for the most part. But yeah, let me go ahead and get them on, and then we'll get this started. So give me 1 second. And let me just swap out the text here from this to this. Yeah, I spelled it right. Good. All right. Let me hop in the call real quick. And all right. We should all be good now.
Hello.
All right. So let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. I'm the host, right? Everyone knows. Everyone that's watching this probably knows me. But I'm Razor. I also go by Richard. Doesn't really matter which name you use. And I just finished streaming, of course, all of the first chapter for Higurashi Onikakushi, which was really, really good. It was a very, very, very fun game.
It's a trip.
It's a ton of fun. And of course, joining me, like I said, is Greycart.
I go by Billy. I've been exposed to When They Cry for quite a while, and I've read all of the core arcs for Higurashi, including Rei, which is the epilogue arc, a couple of the console arcs, and a little bit of Umineko. So I'd say that I have a pretty good grasp of the mysteries and kind of the now that I'm going back through Onikakushi again, it's fun because it's I get to see certain things from a different perspective, and just excited to discuss it with you and hear your thoughts.
Also, hey Moon, thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I can't wait to get into this, because like I said, this is just going to be more of a simple, casual discussion. We'll go into, the chapters, and then we'll give our thoughts and theories and stuff. We've got quite a few, so that's going to be very, very, very cool. And also, of course, joining us is Nadia.
Yes. Hello, I'm Nadia. I read Higurashi and Umineko last year, and I bug everybody to read it, including and I'm really excited because when somebody reads it for the first time, their theories are so much fun. So I'm looking forward to this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's gonna be great. Let's we'll move into what the 07th expansion is. So in general, I did forget. Are we just gonna just read it as is?
I'll read through this part.
Okay.
So Higurashi no Nakokoro ni was localized as Higurashi When They Cry, and it's a series of sound novels that were originally developed by 07th expansion, and they were officially localized by Manga Gamer. There's been 2 copies of the script. The old one is kind of just lost because Manga Gamer threw it out, and they redid it, and we're better off for it now. But there are actually additional arcs and things that were changed in the console versions. Those have been included in the mod that Richard read through, which is 07th mod, and those they vary a little bit. It's mostly the censorship stuff, but it's kind of like there's a couple pieces that try to make things flow a little bit better. But yeah, generally speaking, there's mainly just one localized script with a couple different changes. So we consider the Manga Gamer version to be sort of the definitive one. The story is split up into 2 parts. Each part is 4 chapters. So that's a total of 8 core story arcs. And then, of course, after that was published, an epilogue disc titled Ray, which means gratitude, was released. These discussion videos are primarily going to focus on those 9 core arcs, because I don't think you're going to go into any of the console arcs, right?
I will eventually. I mean, I'm going to go through the whole list that you gave me.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, for now, we're going to focus on those, and we'll bring up any side content as it becomes relevant. There's a little bit in here tonight, which is fun, but yeah, this one's primarily going to focus on Onikakushi, like you said, or the Demoning Away chapter.
Yeah, that's going to be man. Like I can't wait to talk about it. I had to like hold back. I had like theories like popping into my head, of course, throughout the entire playthrough, but I'm not gonna like stop playing and then just let me just write some notes real quick and then just type away on a little notepad and and then go back to streaming. Oh man, it was a lot of fun. Like the series is fucking great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Ryukishi himself has stated that he considers the reason he calls this a game and not just a novel is because he feels that the game is him having an open discussion with the reader through the mystery and having having you solve the mysteries that you're presented on your own.
Yeah, because that is it's not an ARG. It's more like just an overarching mystery, and I guess the game is that you putting it together like you just said, which is quite unique. And I don't think there's many games out there that do this sort of stuff. I can't think of many franchises, at least, that do this. I mean, like not like as a cop out, but like Dark Souls does with like its storytelling. It's not a mystery, but like if you want the story, it's there. Just read stuff, right? Other games do something very minimally. Like most survival horror games will give you, logs and stuff, but that kind of just tells you exactly what's going on. But for it to be a little more shrouded in mystery, or for it to be indirect, I can't think of any other game that I've ever played that's similar or close to Higurashi so far.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Unless you know of any.
I mean Umineko, but that's also just more When They Cry.
Yeah, no, like shit that's not from the same franchise.
I think the only one I can think of maybe is AI the Somnium Files. Thinking about actually both of them that are out kind of do that, but the first one gives you the whole story. The second one, this is not about those games, but they're a little bit similar.
Interesting. I don't think I've heard of that one either, but it seems like it is another visual novel style game. So that's I could see that being a thing for sure.
Yeah, that one was done by and Nadia's right. This isn't about this, so we won't get too deep. But it's by Uchikoshi, who is the director of 999 and the Zero Escape games. So
well, of course.
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. Also, Riddler, thanks so much for the raid, and welcome raiders. Today we're going to be just discussing the first chapter of Higurashi. So it's more like a podcast style stream if you want to have us in the background. If you've never played Higurashi, we're about to get into like what it is. But if you don't want this spoiled, which I would recommend, honestly, then please go check out the series. It is a very, very good novel. The Zero Escape games. So I haven't played them. I don't know if you guys have any opinions on them.
I've played a bit of 999, and I know that Nadia just adores AI. I've only played the first one, not the second one, so.
I've played the Zero Escape games in 999 and the 2 AI the Somnium Files. Out of his games, I would say the AI the Somnium Files are the weakest, but they are really fun. They're really accessible for one. So.
Yeah, because I remember specifically like back when 999 came out in Japan, there was a thread in the something awful forums that was paywalled where one of the
Yeah.
where Slow Beef, I don't know if you guys know who he is, but he was playing through 999, and everyone was pissed off because they wanted to know what the fuck was going on, but they didn't want to pay for it. And then you had people being like, well, I could grief and like spoil everything, or I could just not, because fuck you, I'm paying for it. And it was it was fucking something. And then now the game's been out officially in the West since then, and I still can't believe we had shit like that.
Right. Well, I think what we can do is I liked your idea of we'll go through chapter by chapter, and then if either of you have any thoughts or anything like that, we can stop for a second. But otherwise, I'll move on to the next one.
Okay. Um,
So, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, so we open with a poem. This poem is by Frederica Berncastel, and it says, "Please do not deplore yourself. Even if the world does not forgive you, I will forgive you. Please do not deplore yourself. Even if you do not forgive the world, I will forgive you. So please tell me, what will it take for you to forgive me?" And we open in Showa 58, or 1983, early summer. It sounds like someone is swinging something heavy like a baseball bat. The person swinging the bat monologues about how I trusted her and how they lament that it had to come to this. After some more of their monologue, we realize they are probably killing the girl in question. Towards the end of this scene, another person calls out to Keiichi Maibara, which is his first mention, to wake up, which ends the nightmare he's having. Keiichi and Mr. Maibara approach the town of Hinamizawa, where Keiichi states that he will be living from now on. So kind of a strong opening.
Yeah, it was if you're not expecting it, it really sets the tone. It sets the tone really nicely for just, well, Higurashi, I guess, as a whole. Especially with the sounds. Like the way when the game starts out, right? It has that poem, and then it just fades to black, and then you hear like the swinging, and then it's cutting in like, this is a work of fiction, anything blah 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 is unrelated, and then he swings again, and then the next one pops up, right? Like the next warning or whatever pops up, and that was really fucking cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's not really not a lot to go on. It's mainly just setting up like, hey, this is from Keiichi Maibara's perspective, because obviously, like, as soon as he wakes up from that nightmare, we're in his shoes, and we're introduced to a couple characters, just mainly Keiichi and his father. We don't know who the mystery girl is, and the town of Hinamizawa itself. So, one thing. So I don't know if you have the notes up, but I wrote just for stream, I wrote a quick summary of all of the events that are important that happen, and I've bolded everything anytime an important concept appears for the first time, so that we can kind of like remind ourselves when certain things come up.
Sure.
In the next subchapter, it's the first appearance of Mrs. Maibara, Rena, Mion, Satoko, and Rika. Not a whole lot happens in this one. Basically, Keiichi wakes up, he goes to school, we meet all four of his friends that make up the school club. Of course, those being the aforementioned Rena, Mion, Satoko, and Rika. I should probably also mention their last name. So Rena is Rena Ryugu, Mion is Mion Sonozaki, Satoko is Satoko Hojo, and Rika is Rika Furude. Because their last names do become important later on in the story. So we walk to school with Rena and Mion. We get there and are almost immediately pranked by Satoko, but we miss all of her pranks, thankfully, somehow. We find out really quick the personalities of each character. So Rena has like this verbal tick where she calls everything cute instead of cute. I think it's like in Japanese it would be kawaii for cute, but she goes like kai.
Yeah.
Like she kind of like slurs it a little bit. Mion is kind of like a tomboy who she plays it cool, but you can tell maybe she's not like 100% invested in that persona. she just kind of, it almost seems like her playing it cool is like an act a lot of the time.
Yeah, she's putting up
Um,
this like mask to hide the like girly side of her.
yeah. Satoko, of course, is the little gremlin. We love her. But she's the kind of person that can dish out pain, but as soon as it gets turned back on her, she immediately starts crying.
Right.
And then we meet Rika, who is about the same age as Sadako, which she is very close friends with her. And yeah, they just seem really, really close. We don't know a lot about Rika initially. She just seems kind of reserved and quiet. But she also reveals something interesting, and that is that the opening scene was Keiichi coming back from a trip. So this was not actually his first appearance in Hinamizawa. So this is he's been living there at least for a little bit. He went on a trip, and this is him coming back, which becomes important later, but just something to keep in the back of your mind.
Yeah, I did forget to put the image up of what we're talking about. These are the characters up on screen, by the way. And so yeah, from like left to right, we do have it is Mion, then it is it's not, is it Satoko? Satoko's the blonde one, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so it's Satoko, then we have Rena, then we have Rika, and then the other two have not been introduced yet, but those are other characters that we'll go into.
Right. On the way home from school, Mion recommends that they should give Keiichi a tour of the town so that he gets more acquainted with Hinamizawa. And they all think that's a great idea, so they choose to meet up tomorrow. And then after that is the chapter ends, but we're introduced to the concept of tips, which I know this is going to disappoint Nadia, but I have a confession. When I first read Onikakushi, I skipped the tips because I didn't think that they were important, but now I know better.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious. Yeah.
William, how
And
could you?
It's funny because watching you play through Onikakushi and like seeing the tips for myself, it's like, oh, I could have pieced together so much earlier. And yeah, so it was just that was fun. But yeah, so we get introduced to the concept of tips here, which are in other games they might seem like just small things that are inconsequential, but no, here they're actually huge pieces of the mystery. These, funny enough though, are actually not, because it's just talking about how the school is a mixed grade, so there's not a lot of kids in the town, so all the kids get kind of taught together, and they don't really have uniforms either because no one cares to moderate it. So
right.
But that's all of chapter 1. Any thoughts on the characters that got introduced?
Well, actually, regarding the tips, I don't remember if it was you who mentioned it or if it was someone else, but I know at first I was like, okay, well, these are probably things I'll read at the end, because that's what I thought.
No.
I was like, these seem like maybe concepts or things to read once the game is over, or, it might just be miscellaneous information that might not be relevant. And I don't remember if you mentioned it or something, but I think I did something like, I'll read them at the end of stream. Like at the end of the stream, we'll go through all the tips that we got. And then I don't remember if it was you or someone else who mentioned you should probably try reading them as soon as you get them. I know people on YouTube kind of commented that. They were like, dude, you should be reading these as soon as you get them. And I was like, okay. So I started doing that, like, at least with the second part onwards, because at first I was like, well, this is just fucking whatever. It's like, all right, cool, there's no uniforms, who cares, right? And then we get to the other ones, and then they actually provide more context, or not necessarily more context, but context that's missing, that isn't covered, which is the way the tips are handled is very, very, very well done, because they do set up, they're things that reside in the back of your mind, and then they pop up when you get to whatever they were referencing or mentioning, which I'll talk more about when we get to the festival, because I remember one specifically from there.
Yeah, it's also what I really love about the way they're structured is it's about what they tell you, but I think it's more about what it doesn't tell you, because there are a lot of things that if there is a lack of information, there's room for doubt, and those kind of holes are what Ryukishi is expecting you to fill.
In the question arcs especially, I feel like the tips introduce more questions than you're expecting. Like, you're hoping that, okay, I just read this chapter, there are some tips here that are going to clarify something or set up the next chapter, or subchapter rather, and it doesn't. It makes it worse or better depending on how you see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that for sure. There were times where I'm like, the fuck is this thing telling me? Or I mean, when we get to the festival, I remember one specifically where stuff like that happened, and it was quite something. But I mean, as for the characters, they're all pretty lovable. Higurashi does a great job of making you forget that something terrible is going on. It does a very good job at just setting up the characters to the point where you just forget, like, oh yeah, there was like a murder at a dam a while ago because I'm playing cards right now with my friends and it's getting pretty intense. It does a really, really, really good job at that. And the first chapters, like Billy told me off stream, they set up the characters pretty well, and they really make you fall in love with them. They're all little archetypes, right? Of course, like Rena being a shy girl that's obsessed with cute things. You have Mion, who's a tomboy who tries to put on the tough act, but she's also like the club leader and stuff like that. And you get to see their archetypes flourish a little more as the story goes on. And you get to fall in love with these characters. They become like your friends, right? It's like you spend every day with them basically, and you hang out with them every day. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that happens, and the way they're just written is very, very, very nicely done.
I agree. And speaking of slice of life, subchapter 2. We get shown around town and have a picnic with our friends. But no, so that's the main event of what happens in terms of like actual content of subchapter 2. But the most important thing is a little sting at the end, because we run into Tomitake for the first time. So hold up. Right before we run into Tomitake, we do learn about the Furude shrine. So we learn that Rika is probably the shrine maiden. Like she's probably, or at least she is involved with the shrine of the town. Because she shares a name with it. And we also are briefly introduced to the concept of the Watanagashi festival, but we're not told like any details. It's like, oh yeah, we have a festival every year. Yeah. Let's talk about what we're going to eat for lunch. But shortly after the picnic that they have, we're introduced to Tomitake at the dam site. We talk to him while Rena is looking around for treasure, because she wants to take something cute home. And he kind of just half-heartedly tells us about the dismemberment of 79. So at the dam, there was a person who got brutally murdered, and
it's not funny, really, but
he just casually brings it up.
Yeah, right, exactly, and he's Tomitake. I don't know. We don't really know what his deal is yet, but he's very clearly like his appearance makes him seem like he's either ex-military or at least like extremely athletic. And he's carrying around a camera. He took a picture of Keiichi. Keiichi kind of calls him a creep a little bit, but he's like, oh, sorry, I'm used to taking pictures of birds, and they can't talk back, so I don't know what I was doing.
Yeah, the way he words that is, oh my god.
It's so funny. But yeah, no, so Tomitake tells us about the dismemberment, but we don't get a ton of information, just more so like, hey, this happened. There was a killing here. And when we talk to Rena about it later, because we eventually stop talking to Tomitake and meet back up with Rena in the landfill. We ask her about it, like we ask if anything happened, not even specifically about a dismemberment, and she just goes, I don't know, very flatly. And that pretty much is the end of the chapter. We part ways from there. Keiichi goes home. This time we actually get 2 tips again, which is not normal. Sometimes usually they kind of vary up the amount you get depending on what the content of the chapter was. And this feels like there was more information, but we still got 2. So the first one is about Keiichi's house. Not super interesting, just the fact that it's huge. Yeah. And he never considered his family to be rich, but he's like, well, my dad is an artist, so maybe I guess he's famous. Maybe he has famous art. The second one is the more interesting one for sure, because it is specifically the newspaper clipping that is about the dam dismemberment. We learned that it happened in June of 1979, and it involved 6 suspects. One of the 6 was caught and questioned. He confessed and revealed the names of the other 5. 4 of the other 5 were caught, but the last one, who was considered to be the ringleader, is yet to be found. The police currently think it was a drunken dispute, but having multiple culprits with inconsistent testimonies is making them continue the investigation.
Right.
So this is the sting that really gets you going in terms of like, what is actually going on here? Because the opening was really strong, but you're kind of like you said earlier, you're led to not really think about it too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is where I feel like what's the name of the author again? Keep forgetting.
Ryukishi 07.
Ryukishi, right? Yeah. So Ryukishi's writing is really, really good, specifically here because of stuff like this. Like I mentioned, he gives you something to chew on in the back of your mind. And when he introduces this tip, when they introduce that section in the chapter, that's when things kind of kick in. Because remember, if you've never heard of Higurashi, if you've never seen this game at all, if some friend is like, hey, you should check out this game, don't look up anything about it, just pop it in, play it. Here's my copy. They give you a burnt disc, and then you just play it. You're like, oh, well, this is just like some slice of life. Visual novel. Why not? I'll give it a shot. The characters are likable. You get to chapter 2. You get past the school day, and then you are in a junkyard for some reason with one of the girls. You're like, oh, maybe there's going to be a kiss here or something. What's going to happen? And then some dude takes a picture of you, and then he just tells you, I'm surprised you're here at the dam. Did you hear about the dismemberment that happened 5 years ago? And then immediately you're like, what the fuck what do you mean dismemberment?
Yeah,
5 years
you could
ago,
have just said murder, but that's like a much harsher word.
yeah, he could have said, "Oh man, I'm surprised you guys are hanging out at a murder site." Like that would still be like shocking, but he's like, yeah, I can't believe you're here after a guy got dismembered and then all like 5 body parts were like fucking like went missing, right? Or 6 body parts went missing, and then the protagonist is like, "What the fuck?" And then you're like, "What the fuck?" And then you have the tips here, which go more into that. And then once we, again, not to like say spoil sub chapter 3, but you're given this tip, and then the next chapter just starts off as if like nothing, like you like who cares? It's the morning or whatever. Like you just woke up, let's go to school, and then you hang out for a while, and you even forget like, oh yeah, there was a murder here.
Yep.
Like that just stays in the back of your mind until it's brought up again, and then you're like, oh right, guy got fucking dismembered.
Yeah, it's so funny because the subchapter 3 is a good example of like why the tips are so important, because basically nothing happens in chapter 3. It's all the tips. It gives you in terms of like the overarching story, the most amount of raw content. Subchapter 3 is just a day for Keiji to hang out with his friends and play games. So we are introduced to things like the concept of the club. Because before we've just kind of been hanging out with Mion, but she says now she introduces us, hey, we have this club and we play Batsuge or punishment games. And the punishment games are basically like normal board games, stuff that you would play with your friends. But the catch is that the loser has to suffer some kind of absurd punishment. And usually it's they're kids, right? So it's not too bad, but it's like telling the teacher who loves curry that curry sucks, or wearing a maid outfit, or just stupid stuff.
Yeah, simple punishment games.
Exactly, yeah. So we learn about that, and then not a whole lot happens. We basically just hang out with our friends. We go home. We help Rena at the landfill a little bit more, but during that, we do find the stack of tabloids, and we look for the article. We don't really get to read it a whole lot in the middle of the chapter, but we are awarded that full tabloid article as a tips at the end of the chapter. And that tabloid article reveals that the missing ringleader is described to have forced the other 5 to dismember the corpse in order to create a pact of silence between them. It's also revealed that Onikakushi is the name of the village's swamp, which is rumored to be bottomless. The writer of the tabloid article thinks that the ringleader may have actually fallen in, which is, again, just after playing card games with your friends, such a pleasant topic.
Right, right. It is a very also. Hey, Bo, thanks for stopping by. It is a very, I don't know. It's like whiplash for a second.
Hmm.
It's like yeah, you are playing card games with your friends, and then it's like, oh, here's a tip. By the way, this it just talks about the Dam project, and it's just labeled something like Dam project, and then like the second one is like article of like Hinamizawa dismemberment. It's something absurd like that, and you
Hmm.
just immediately are given the entire article of how, and you can tell it's a very pulpy, like pulp magazine type of article with the way it's written, that and the ad at the end. But
Yeah.
you're just tossed into this like here's what happens, and then you read. It's like you're holding the page like closer to your face as you're reading. You're like, what the fuck is this? And you're like pulling the page up like with your fingertips as you're trying to like this happened in my town that I'm in right now.
I feel like the tips having all the details at the end about the damn murders in the last two sub chapters that we've talked about anyway, 2 and
Mhm.
3. It's sort of what Keiichi was experiencing himself, seeing the
Hmm.
magazines at the end of a fun
Mhm.
day playing with his friends.
Yeah.
So the same sort of bewilderment he has, we get to experience.
Hmm. Right, and
I get that.
that's what I really like about his writing is just this.
Yep.
He puts you in Keiichi's shoes quite well, and it's really interesting because like you just said, yeah, it's you're experiencing what he's experiencing because he pulled out that whole like tablet. He pulled out that whole little article, and we're reading it. But right, it's like the end of the chapter is like when he gets home, and it's like we're home now, right? So we get to read it too. It's and get our the same reaction we're having is probably the same reaction he's having.
Right. And the other thing too is and this is never explicitly stated that it was a part of the magazine, but we can kind of surmise that it is.
Mm,
The other tips in this chapter was about it's about the dam project in particular. It started in 1975, and we learned that the villagers formed the Onikakushi Guardians, which
mm,
we don't really know a lot about Onikakushi yet. We know that it's the name of the swamp, but that's really about it. Um, but the Guardians were able to stall the project through unity, and that's really all that they say in this. They don't really
mm,
say how they did it, if it was peaceful or not, but just unity. Um, the
right.
Guardians have since dissolved, but the feeling and the reason I think this was an article is because of this right here, is because they've since been dissolved.
Mm,
But the feelings of unity never left the villagers. The
yeah.
tips is revealed to be a summary of the events written by Kiichiro Kimiyoshi, which we don't know who that person is yet, but that name again just needs to stick in the back of your mind.
Right. And this is one of those things where if you're playing the game in Japanese because you're a Japanese person in 2002, um while you're playing through this game, it's probably a lot easier to piece certain things together. Because I mean, if you're, again, if you're Japanese and you look up what the kanji for Onigafchi, you probably can figure out what the hell that is. You can probably know what that is. If you are a Westerner and you don't speak Japanese or you speak little Japanese, you might be able to recognize some of the words in there. You're like, well, I know what an oni is. I know what oni means. What the fuck does gafchi mean? Right? Like, oni is like an ogre or a demon or whatever, but what the hell's the other thing? So so you might think, oh, okay, well they're describing themselves to be like tough guardians or something, right? Like that's like a sort of context clue that you're given. If you're Japanese, you're like, well, I know what the okay, well I know what those two mean, or those two words mean. That's interesting. But compared to that, like Westerners kind of will have a little harder of a time, unless again you're weebing out and you yourself are doing the same thing where you swamp the language, you find Onigashiki, and then you fucking like translate and try to find the kanji specifically and what they mean, piece them together that way. But obviously, it gets explained later, like what all this means.
Right, yeah. And so this is one thing that I want to pitch in on a little bit is that in terms of like the actual name, so it's Onigafuchi. I forget what kanji is used for fuchi, but the ga is actually the same character that's used in Onigashima, which is like I believe it's an old folk tale about a demon island.
Hmm.
But that kind of clues you in because the character that's used is one that is not common in modern Japanese. So
Mm,
it kind of gets the gears turning of, okay, well, if they're using this character, it might be a name from like an older time, like long, long ago.
right. And
So
it's the whole thing of like, again, if you're playing this in 2002, the game is set in the 80s. This village must be ancient, or the name that they're using must be, ancient as fuck, probably. Specifically due to it kind of, it gives some more background or subtle, not subtle, sorry, how to word this. It subtly informs the player that the villagers or those who founded this group are probably very intimate with that character they used, because otherwise they would not be using it. They would be using just the Onikakushi, right? Like they would not be using an older version of a character, mainly because people tend to get on with the times, if that makes sense. In Japan, they tend to avoid using things that are difficult, especially nowadays. Because I mean, I'm sure you can attest to this, but like a lot of Japanese people nowadays don't read kanji as well as they used to.
agree with that. I think that it's internet culture has led them to use less kanji when they're
Mhm.
typing, but kanji is still very much so taught in schools.
Right, right. Okay, yeah, no, that's good. That's good insight either way. But I'm pretty sure that like there's certain kanji that for definitely doesn't get used.
Oh yeah, for
Because
sure. Because
there's
ahead.
just easier like ways to quote unquote convey the well, again, like you said, through internet culture they'll just use like like hiragana for it, instead of just typing out the kanji or trying to find which version of the kanji to use, because it's all contextual.
Right. And there's also instances too where like just exposure to more cultures and countries has led them to use more loan words on average.
Yeah.
So they have kanji for things like door or table or restaurant or things like that, but they just
Mm.
say wa, teburu,
Mm.
so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that like in that sense, yeah, for sure, there's less kanji usage, but that's not just young people. That's like I think that's basically everyone since the 90s.
Yeah, right, right. I have to change my brain a bit. I know for sure like the current generation of like Japanese Zoomers, or not. Well, no. What would it be like Gen
Millennials.
Alpha? No,
Oh, alpha,
like
yeah.
yeah, like Gen Alpha or whatever came after them. Like them, they for sure probably going to be using kanji a lot less. But again, this is just like this is more talking about the period itself. If we focus on like 2002, you'd be like, okay, well these guys are pretty, these guys are pretty old. If you're playing this 22 years later, holy fuck, if you're playing this game 22 years later, you probably wouldn't like even realize if you're some like 19-year-old like kid playing this for the first time in Japan, you're like, oh well, I've never seen that character, but all right, wonder what it means.
Right. um, so with all that in mind, I oh God, I'm so excited to get to the festival. But so so for subchapter 4, well we have to get through 4 and 5 first. But
Yeah.
4 is thankfully not a lot happens. Keiichi goes to the club. They play zombie tag. Keiichi, of course, loses, and he has to. I forget exactly what his punishment is. I don't think I noted it down, but he lost. So he had to suffer one of their punishments, and he helps Rena at the landfill again. This time they actually take a break so that they can have some tea together. And they finally get the colonel free after the break. So going back a little bit, the specific treasure she was looking for was they call it Colonel Randy. It's Colonel
Mhm.
Sanders.
Yeah.
They're looking for a Colonel Sanders statue. And the freaky part is after learning all this about the dismemberment, they pull him out and the colonel's right arm falls off, which the
Mhm.
right arm was the one piece of the corpse that was missing
Mhm.
from the dismemberment, because each person got a piece, one person's still missing, and they haven't found that last piece of the body. So could be symbolic of something, just something to freak Keiichi out, which is great.
Yeah.
Um,
Could Could be foreshadowing. Who knows?
And this is a weird instance of kind of a non-chapter, because we get one tip at the end, one tips, and this one's about Rena, which we learned that Rena is a nickname. Her real name is Reina.
Yeah.
But the quote at the end was, I think it was by Rika, and she goes, "Rena is Rena. Only strangers would call her Reina."
Right.
And that's pretty much all we're left with for 4. So not a lot has changed or happened. Just Keiichi living his daily life with this the knowledge of the dismemberment in the back of his head.
Right.
I do feel like that tip, though, in this chapter in particular, nothing really seems to happen other than that Keiichi gets a little bit freaked out a couple times.
Mhm.
And I feel like the tip introduces the concept that he doesn't really know them that well. Like we don't really know them that well. We didn't know Rena's real name.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like we mentioned a little bit ago, like with the article. I feel like these are all like revelations, right? That Keiichi would have as well. It's like, oh, I didn't know Banana was her nickname, right? Like we didn't know. He probably didn't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting revelation, and it's one that I feel like, to me, the most important thing that stands out about it is that quote from Rico, where it's like, yeah, her name's Reina. It doesn't matter. Like,
Also, Rika says only strangers would call her Reina, and earlier in that subchapter, I think it's Tomitaki that also says something about outsiders, or like,
Mm-hmm.
what exactly was it? That Keiichi joked Rena was roaming the town looking for more victims.
yes.
And
Yeah.
Tomitaki says, is that a warning for an outsider like me? That's the first time, at least in my memory, that's the first time that somebody separates the village from outsiders.
Yes,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the first time that you're kind of made aware that this is a very tightly knit group of villagers, compared to, well, say a city like Tokyo, where you might have a few friends, you might know your neighbor, maybe your landlord, but you don't really know everyone in your block. Unlike here, in Hinamizawa, where everyone knows each other. All 1,000 people know each other. When we were going with, when we went through the like tour of the village, we noticed that Mion and Rena are saying hi to people, and they're addressing them by their name. And Keiichi doesn't, because he doesn't know who they are yet, right? Because he's still an outsider. He's still new to the town, but they've been here, all their life, and everyone knows each other. They're like, oh yeah, that was Lady so and so from like this part of the village, and that was Mr. so and so from this other part. And because it just goes through like it's character building, it's world building, and it just shows you like how, like I said, tightly knit they all are. Also, Bee Killer, yeah, thanks for stopping by. Yeah, all the characters are really neat. Like it really makes you, like, when you're playing through the game, you're like, oh man, I want these characters to be happy. I want them to really continue to be friends. and then stuff happens.
I think that so it's never mentioned exactly how long Keiichi has been living in the village.
Mm-hmm.
We know that because of Rika telling us that he was on a trip, we know that he's been living in the village long enough that his family needed to take a trip somewhere, which is like, I feel like you'd at least want to have a couple weeks to get settled into your home before you start planning trips. But that scene of them like walking down and talking to people that he doesn't know is good for setting up the fact that Keiichi obviously has not been here long enough to feel like a full citizen of Hinamizawa. Like, he still might have those feelings of being an outsider, even though he has these close friends. Like, he feels like they're close. He's not feeling ostracized, but he's feeling like maybe he doesn't, not that he doesn't belong, but he feels like an outsider.
Right. He hasn't settled in. He's new. Yep. He doesn't feel in yet. Yeah,
exactly. And speaking of being in, so today's another day at school. So for subchapter 5, yeah, he goes to school. He begins by recounting his experience with seeing Rena's house the night prior. So he did actually, I didn't keep this in the subchapter 4 notes, but he does actually help Rena carry the Colonel statue home.
Yeah, they get like
'Cause
a tarp or
obviously-
something, and they carry it back.
Yeah, she's gonna, like, they're kids, right? On her own, she's probably not strong enough to take it back.
Mhm.
But he talks about seeing the house and how it was looked like a normal house on the outside for the most part, but it was just, the yard was filled with trash.
Mhm.
And it wasn't, to Rena, it's not trash because it's all things that she thought was cute and that she wanted to display. But it does kind of look like, if anyone has driven through like any rural part of America, you've probably seen a house like it.
Right.
It's just, yeah, it's a lot of stuff in the yard. At school, they talk a little bit more about the upcoming festival, so we actually get to learn a little bit more about it. We play another card game with everybody. Keiichi does his best to win this time, and he is like on top. Every single girl in the group has lost, and they've had to suffer a punishment until it gets down to Mion and Keiichi.
Mhm.
And at the very end, Keiichi loses, and the final punishment was to repeat all of the previous punishments. So he had to wear like a collar, he had to wear cat ears and a tail, he had to wear a maid outfit. He's going through it. He's having a rough day.
Mhm. Yeah, they had a ton of punishment games like stuck in like little pieces of paper, and it just so happened
Yep.
that he pulls one that says do all the ones that came before this.
Yep. So, and this time, so he's still in his ridiculous outfit, and they're walking home from school together. They bump into Tomitake again. Weirdly, Mion seems to recognize him. So this is probably somebody that he's told us that he comes to Hinamizawa every year around the time of the festival, but that kind of solidifies it in our minds because we know,
Mhm.
oh, Mion has been here for forever. She recognizes him. He's probably telling the truth. So at least we don't have to suspect him there. At least as a reader, I feel like we can stop suspecting him because he was acting kind of sus the last couple times that we've met him.
Mhm.
And this time, so he leaves and we ask Mion about him because we go, hey, you obviously recognize him. What's up? What's his deal? Is he suspicious? And Mion goes, please, if anyone was suspicious, I'd be able to tell from a mile away.
Right.
Keiichi had the best day of his life for most of that. True, yeah. Putting all those outfits on his friends was good. I don't know if that makes up for the punishment though.
It was all fan service for sure, because they're like, oh well, what character would fit, like what archetype would fit best for each character? And then you had the little sister archetype, you had the cat girl archetype, the cute girl in the swimsuit archetype, and so on. Or the girlfriend archetype for Irena. Well, no, she had the maid one. So it was quite fucking something. But bro was having a field day until it all came crashing down on him. Because I was waiting for it too when we were playing through it.
Mm-hmm. And then continuing with the theme of the tips being like things that Keiichi is reading alone after he's parted ways with his friends. This time it's a community bulletin board notice regarding the festival. Mayor Kimiyoshi, so we can piece that together in our mind now. The Kimiyoshi that was describing the Guardians earlier is probably the same one as the mayor. But yeah, Mayor Kimiyoshi appears to be asking for assistance with a few things regarding setup. That's basically it for subchapter 5. Subchapter 6 specifically, so the people on stream can't see it, but I wrote I wrote all these summaries that we could go through, and I specifically put in the short version of the summary that we may want to read the full summary, just because this one has a lot of exposition.
Sure.
So I'm gonna try to read through it just straight before we start discussing stuff. So Keiichi is a little bummed today because club activities are paused until after the festival since everyone is busy helping out. Late in the evening, Rena comes to get Keiichi at his home. They meet up with Mion to go to the festival. Rika and Satoko aren't there since Rika is actually a festival committee member and will probably be with the committee all night. Over half of the village is attending the festival tonight. We bump into Satoko and Rika donning her Miko attire. Rena sees Rika in another cute outfit and goes ballistic again. We also bump into Tomitake, who sticks around with us for a little while. Everyone is having fun playing games, and Keiichi talks about how fulfilling moving here has been for him. Tomitake and Rika have duties they need to tend to after a little while, so they split from the party. The rest of us decide to find a good spot to watch Rika's performance. Rika's performance involves her using a ritual hoe to purify the cotton of an old futon, since Watanagashi means cotton drifting. The villagers will later send the cotton of their old futons and jackets down the river as a form of respect for them and for Oyashiro-sama, which is the first time we hear that name, who we learn is the village's patron god. We get a couple of splash screens. The first one says, "At first I was a bit anxious. Hurting someone was something I never even considered. Nevertheless, the anxiety then gave place to loneliness, doubt, and more. And then that wicked, murderous intent eventually took control of my mind." Second one says, "The boy took the first step towards an unrecoverable daily life, not even realizing that he was walking into the abyss." And then the last one describes Onikakushi, which is a tragedy born from the desire to believe. Are those tears of repentance or tears of resentment? So after those ominous messages, we return to the fun of the festival. We run into Tomitake again, who is with a woman named Mio Takano. Again, first time introduced to her. They talk to Keiichi about the dam project, and they also reveal that the dismemberment victim and missing ringleader were struck by what some of the older villagers refer to the curse of Oyashiro-sama, which is another new concept for us. They also drop the bombshell that it wasn't one case. Each year, someone dies and someone goes missing. Each incident is believed to be Oyashiro-sama's curse. So year 1, the construction worker dies and the ringleader goes missing. Year 2, a dam supporter dies by falling off a cliff and his wife went missing on the same day. Year 3, the shrine's Shinto priest dies from an illness and his wife went missing that same evening, although it's believed that she committed suicide by throwing herself into the swamp. Year 4, a Hinamizawan housewife was beaten to death. And before we can get onto who disappeared for year 4, we're cut off. Keiichi goes into a fit and he asks, like, well, what about year 5? What happened on year 5? And that's when Tomitake breaks that, oh, well, that would be this year.
It's right now.
We're also fed some rumors like how the housewife was a family member of the couple of dam supporters from year 2, which is why she died, and that people who don't attend the festival are more likely to be struck by the curse. Tomitake dismisses the idea that the curse is real, saying that there were a couple of homicides and a couple of accidents. No supernatural foul play occurred. Tomitake and Takano say they'd like to spend the rest of the night alone, so Keiichi parts ways with them and meets up with the club again to close out the night. And this time we get 4 tips, but it's basically 2, because the first 3 are just explaining the
summarize the first
years.
murders.
Yeah. So the first 3 go into more details about years 2 to 4. The couple that fell were the Hojos, and we know that name, but we don't know their relation to Satoko yet.
Mm-hmm.
The shrine priest couple were the Furudes. So again, we know the name, but not the relationship yet. The housewife is not explicitly named, but earlier it was mentioned that she's related to the couple from year 2, so we can assume that she's probably a Hojo.
Mm-hmm.
And the final tips is about the local police investigating a dead body, but we are not told when this investigation is taking place.
Mm-hmm.
And that closes out probably the most exposition-heavy chapter.
Oh, yeah, and then there's so many things to talk about. Oh, God. Okay, I guess we can start maybe from, like, the beginning. So, yeah, chapter 6 is a very interesting one. I remember being really excited to, like, get to this, because I was like, oh, okay, well, the festival's coming up, when's that? And it's like, oh, the festival's tonight. Cool. And it gets set up really, really nicely. It's, again, it's that whole, like, we were literally just told, like, oh, here's a community bulletin board, hey, there's a festival going on, and then right before that, like, it's like, oh, hey, by the way, like, you know, no outsiders would call it Reina. And then we get to chapter 6, and then it's very, I don't know, man, it's so well done, because the entire chapter is you playing games with your friends for 90% of it. Tomitake-san joins as a temporary club member. There's this huge like battle to try to bring down the teddy bear, and then it really shows like the sense of community that the people have in this village. As every single, well, not every single member, but like 3 or 4 of the members try to, no, 3 of the members try to go for the teddy bear, and you see they start building a crowd, and everyone like goes wild. The further the further it goes on, as as everyone kind of gets closer and closer to knocking down the bear. And of course, it isn't until we do it that we knock down the bear, because we figured out how to like actually bring it down, and everyone goes fucking wild, right? It builds so much. It builds the characters quite a bit. Not just with that, with like maybe the what was it, like the cute game where they try to get it in on their side, and they try to like go out and find like the cutest thing that she would find cute, and then they like Keiichi like takes her behind the trees, and then shows her something, and she comes back and she's like, he wins, and then she mentions like, oh, he showed me his fuzzy seal, and he immediately gets fucking knocked out by Mion. Because they thought they meant something else, and she's like, no, it was his keychain, it was so cute, he made it like in grade school or whatever. So like it really makes you forget that, oh yeah, like all these people are living in a town where a murder happened and no one's talking about it. Look at these friends having fun. They're all having fun. I'm having fun. I am Keiichi right now.
And yeah, I think Keiichi kind of solidifies that idea when he says that moving to this town has been fulfilling for him, because it sets up the fact that yes, they are earnestly having fun. This isn't a facade. This isn't them like, they're not trying to hide anything, right? Like, you don't really need to think about the murders to have fun with your friends. Like, yeah, some shit went down, but yeah, no, he's just having fun. And then also it introduces the idea that maybe he was struggling where he lived before Hinamizawa.
Yeah.
Because if moving to a new town is good for him, then, what happened to his past? Something just to keep in the back of your mind for now.
Yeah, because I was gonna mention something about that. I don't know if you've covered this, so here I'll mute myself on stream, but I'll ask it to you directly.
I haven't brought it up before, so this is probably the best time to do it, just because again, they're all earnestly having fun as a group.
Okay, yeah, because in a later chapter, since it seems like you didn't actually note this down for probably the future summary, and I don't remember which one. It was one of the later chapters. It was either 9 or 10. Keiichi mentions at some point he's like walking, and he has a clear mind, and he starts to realize, living in this mountain town is really nice compared to the city. Here, everyone only worries about, well, what they're doing from day to day, instead of worrying about miscellaneous things like, or he mentioned specifically what I used to worry about was like what's cram school to go to, what university or high school would accept me, my test scores. But here, I'm just having fun with my friends. I'm enjoying life. I'm enjoying things that a kid my age would be enjoying. And he feels, I don't want to say free, but he doesn't feel the pressure of society. He feels different. He feels like he doesn't have something watching over him. He feels like, he can be himself in this place compared to where he used to live, where, while he had some friends, he wasn't doing, what he's doing with his friends now. He wasn't, going to festivals like these. He wasn't playing, in club activities and having fun and doing batsu games and stuff. He was just worrying more about what to do with school, what his parents would think. And here he's relaxing.
Yeah, there's a specific moment as well about school that we'll bring up in a later chapter, because he talks about it. I believe it's chapter 11, but we'll cover that again in just a little bit.
Yeah, here you get a really good sense of all of this, with just how the entire chapter plays out. It's literally just them at a festival, It's the festival episode in an anime, um, and it's just a bunch of friends having fun. And
Until
then
they get the bombshell at the end, yeah.
and then while everyone's out doing something else, Keiichi asks about the murders because he can't ask his friends. He tried asking his friends if something happened. I believe in the previous chapter when he's walking with Rena, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he asks her like, "Hey, did something happen?" She's like, "No, nothing
Yep.
happened." And the
I mean,
following,
he's tried to ask her like every time they've gone to the landfill, and she either denies it or she's like, I moved here recently, so I wouldn't know anything about that.
yeah. So when he realizes, okay, well, Rena just moved in here, she won't give me any answers. He tries asking Mion, like, "Hey, Mion, did something like happen in the dam?" And she's like, I mean, they try to like they try to build a dam, and then like I remember like some people like got together and they fought, like the parliament like got involved and they fought like the Japanese like government for it for a few years, but no, nothing besides that. It's like, oh, okay. So obviously, like, you know, they're either they really don't know, or they're not telling Keiichi for a reason. And this kind of like, I believe Keiichi also like thinks about it. He's like, well, I mean, if they weren't telling me, it's either because I'm an outsider, or they don't want to scare me, because it's a pretty scary topic. If realistically, like, imagine if you move to a small town in the US or something, it's literally just cornfields everywhere, and you're like, oh yeah, dude, in the Johnson's house there was like a dispute like between neighbors, and like he blew the other guy's head off with a shotgun. He was never caught. He fucking went missing. We don't know where he's at. The body's disappeared. They think he buried it out in the cornfield, but we don't know. You know, like that shit would be fucking terrifying. So they don't like want to scare Keiichi, or it's either because he's an outsider, they don't want to scare him, or he thinks they might be involved. But then he thinks that's fucking stupid. Why would they be involved? They're kids, right? This happens like years ago. And then we get to him asking more about the dismemberments. And that's when we start learning about, like, again, the deaths of what happened. Or sorry, we learn more about what happened to each murder in greater detail. Because at first we just knew, okay, well, some guy got murdered in the dam 5 years ago. Okay, he got dismembered. That's pretty freaky. But then we learn that happens every year. It's been happening every year since then.
Every year on the same day.
On the same day, it happens once again.
And subchapter 7 is when we finally get to feel the cold AC. And
I think about this scene all the time.
Like,
this one, oh, go ahead.
No, it just would be like cool to be able to go specifically into that scene during summer.
Yeah.
Just whenever, and just be there for a while. Just never press the space bar and just enjoy the just
cool
never
air.
Yeah. Just him mentioning the cold AC is blasting, and at that point you're like, I'm in.
Yep.
Just sit there for a while.
So this chapter, so I said I would bring up side content whenever applicable. So this side chapter, or this subchapter, is pretty interesting because we meet Chie for the first time.
Oh,
properly.
I guess before moving on to 7, I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts on 6 or anything else you want to mention about 6.
I am curious what you thought of Takano at that point as a first-time reader.
So she was interesting because to my knowledge, I was able to piece this together pretty quickly, that she was the nurse, or that she was a nurse. It was mentioned at some point. I believe her name was brought up at some point, and I realized, oh, okay, this is the nurse they were talking about. And then later on, when we hear like the old man talking, they mention, oh, you know, like they mention the nurse herself. I don't believe they mentioned her by name, but they mentioned a nurse, and I'm like, well, this is the only other nurse that they've mentioned, right? It has to be her. So it was jarring, kind of. It was weird seeing her be introduced, because she kind of just comes out of nowhere. And then
she knows. She was the only one to tell you a lot
Yeah.
about the murders, because like people have given you bits and pieces, but you've like this is the first time everything is laid out for you.
Oh god. Excuse me.
I guess also there is that she's not like you haven't been able to learn anything from anyone in town. So why do Tomitake and Takano like why are they comfortable telling you?
Yeah, that's
Is it because
something
they're both from outside or
that's something that has been that when I was playing this, I kept thinking about this. I didn't want to mention any of this specifically because normally whenever I finish a series, I give my final thoughts and I go in order. But then Billy was like, "Hey, you want to do like a podcast style thing at the end?" I was like, "Well, you know what? Why not? Let's do that, and we'll save it for there." But when I got to this chapter specifically, it was very weird having all this shit just dropped on you because I was like, "Who is this chick? She's a nurse, right? Who the fuck is she? Why is she telling me all this? Why are they telling me all this? Like, I want answers, so it's, obviously, it's great that I'm being told. But why are they specifically telling me all this so casually? Like, just in a casual conversation. They don't... They're just going into it as if it was like, like when we were playing games a while ago. In the festival, and they're like, yeah. So we have this murder one, right? You know what happened. You know murder one, right? They all got dismembered. They made a silence pact. Everything was cool. Then we got murder two, and then they go just into detail as to like what happened in murder two. They're like, oh, and you won't believe three. Three was crazy, bro. It's like, why are you fucking telling me this? I'm just like a 15-year-old boy, right? Like who fucking like why?
What's good is we do, so that definitely raises some red flags, but we do get a bit of explanation and exposition as to like why she might know a lot of that information in subchapter 7. And we'll go over that once we're done recapping that. But did you have any more thoughts or suspicions about Tomitake and Takano?
I wouldn't... Suspicions, not really. It was more of a... How do they know all this? And if they know this, like, why are they telling me? Because it made me realize, like, they come to this village quite often. Obviously, no one is going to tell them this. No fucking Hinamizawa resident is gonna be like, oh yeah, did you hear about the murders that happened, like, 2 weeks ago? Or did you hear about the ones that happened last year? Like, no one's gonna fucking tell them this. Our friends don't even want to tell us that, and we're residents. We're a resident of the village. So it makes you wonder where they got this info from. And if maybe either they were present for it, or if they're related to someone that might have been murdered, or this incident like made headline news somewhere, or not headline news, but at least local news within the surrounding prefectures or something. Because I'm pretty sure they tried very, very hard, or the mayor tried really, really hard to cover all this up or make sure that it didn't spread out of Hinamizawa. Because, I mean, it's fucking bad publicity, obviously. Hey, a guy got murdered in our town in a drunken dispute, quote unquote.
Right. Well, and specifically, so in subchapter 6, they even say for the third tip, which would be year 4, the only text in that tip is I forget how they worded it, but it's basically like this death was not publicized. So like only the villagers and the cops would know.
Yeah, it was this death was not made public.
But we can throw away any doubts with subchapter 7, which is great. So we before we get to that point, we do meet Chie. She's the teacher, and this was that piece of side content I mentioned was in the original PC versions. She didn't have art yet, so when she talked, it was just text. It was text in the background. But it was funny seeing you play with the full patch for 07th mod, even with the original sprites. She's added it back in because she does get a sprite. I think it's either Arc 2 or Arc 3 is when she gets her first OG sprite. But that was interesting just seeing that in chapter 1.
Yeah, immediately I see the teacher and I'm like, is this fucking like Shiel from Melty Blood?
From Melty Blood.
what's the
Freaking
franchise?
anime.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, is that her? And then you're like, yeah, she's a reference to her.
So today is another day at school, and we play Clue for our club activity today, which, totally normal game to play after you hear about a bunch of gruesome murders.
Right? Yeah.
Um,
Like when God, this shit was so fucking weird. I'll talk more in a bit, but what the fuck?
Keiichi so he doesn't necessarily pull Rena out, but he meets up with Rena in the hallway, and he tries to cheat with her. So he's like, "This is the spirit of our club. We have to do anything to win, right?
Yeah,
As
it ain't
long as we
cheating.
don't lose." Yeah. But before he can even get to that, Chie tells us, "Hey, you have a visitor," and so we go outside, and we meet this big fellow named Kurado Oishi, Boulder. Uh, he's clearly a cop, by the way. We get into his car, which he offers to let us sit in because it has cold AC, which
Mhm.
is very much a cop tactic, right? You're in the hot summer heat. He's like, "Hey, I can fix that. You want to talk?" So he pulls you into the car, and ultimately he kind of like beats around the bush for a little bit, but he tells us that Tomitake was found dead, and Takano has gone missing. Tomitake died by clawing his own throat out, which is extremely disturbing because most people would not get to that point. If they were hurting themselves, they probably wouldn't go all the way.
Mhm.
Um, Oishi tells us that he suspects some of the kids in our class could be involved, and he asks us not to repeat any of this information to them. This kind of angers Keiichi, who demands an explanation. Oishi reveals that the killings may be a conspiracy by the townspeople to kill anyone they believe to be an enemy.
Mhm.
Hypothetically, they could be working together to carry out the killings before hiding the evidence and acting as if nothing happened. And then that is pretty much the end of their conversation. The only note I have down after that is returning to Clue. After all that, kind of freaks Keiichi out a little bit.
Right.
The tips are really interesting, and this is kind of where we can kind of cast doubt away from Takano, or at least we get an explanation for why she would know some of this stuff.
Hmm.
So the first tip describes Tomitake's autopsy in a bit more detail. So he apparently fought back with a wooden plank because that was found near his body.
Hmm.
And he had injuries all over his body that would suggest multiple people were beating him. The police suspect a high-stress situation caused him to snap and claw his own throat out. The second one reveals Jiro Tomitake is a fake pen name. His bike was found about 300 meters away from his body. He still had his wallet, so the police have kind of ruled out that it's a robbery. And tickets in his wallet, like train tickets, reveal that he spends most of his time in Tokyo and Chiba. Takano got close to Tomitake due to her love for bird photography. Tako is noted to be a nurse of the local clinic. And that's kind of the point where we can go, oh, well, if she's a nurse at the clinic, that's probably why she knows about all the deaths, because she's probably the one that's helping with the autopsies, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
It's not a very big clinic. I think there's like, at least as far as we know, it's a small town. There's probably maybe one or two nurses. So
Mhm.
even if she wasn't the one directly working on the bodies, she probably has access to these kinds of medical records. But she's missing, and the police issue a search notice for her. They think she's probably not a suspect, but that she's still a person of interest, and so they want to find her as soon as possible. And that
Right.
closes out chapter 7.
I don't remember. In the card, do they mention what might cause someone to claw at their throat? Or was that later on in a phone call?
That's later on.
Okay.
The only thing that they suspect is that it was because they couldn't find in the autopsy, they didn't find any drugs. So they don't
Mhm.
think it was drugs. They think it was a psychosis thing.
Right. Yeah. Because yeah. Okay. I'm remembering now. But yeah, this was a very interesting chapter. Because again, going into this, I had no idea there was even gonna be like AC. And then the second they mentioned it, I'm like, oh yeah, dude, it's the '80s. Not everyone has AC. What the fuck? And so this must be like a dream for Keiichi. Because the second he steps out of the car, he's like, God, the fucking heat sucks.
Yeah, he actually calls out like the pressure of the heat or something like that.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I feel that too. There'll be times where my apartment is like super cold and I step out and it is like hot as fuck and my glasses will like fog up. I was like, I hate this. But yeah, chapter 7 is very, very, very cool. We were just hanging out with Tomitake. We were just hanging out with I was gonna say Chie, but with Takano, and all of a sudden they're fucking missing. They're like, well, they're not. One's missing. Tomitake clawed his fucking throat out, which is crazy. I believe they mentioned specifically when he was fighting back, they found no traces of like blood or skin that belonged to anyone else on the piece of wood that he was swinging. So it either means that Tomitake wasn't deliberately trying to hurt whoever he was swinging at, or he sucked and missed a lot, which kind of confused, I believe it was Oishi and Keiichi, who were like, well, the guy was pretty fit. Like, how did he, like the guy was, he was in shape, which kind of, again, adds to the whole, is he ex-military? Is he just an otaku for military stuff? I don't remember the specific term for it, but there are dudes that they like to roleplay like they're in the military. Like, they will make airsoft guns and they'll go out and, like, shoot in the mountains, right? So it makes you wonder, like, what he was. But the guy is relatively fit. He's young. He's an adult, right? So he can defend himself. Or do you think he could? So something must have happened to him to make, obviously to induce like a psychosis to make him claw his throat out, because it's fucking weird. I don't know anyone who would be able to do that. Because realistically, your brain at some point when you feel too much pain will just knock you out.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're experiencing immense pain, it will just shut you off so you don't feel it. You'll still, whatever like lingering pain will come when you wake up, but at that moment, if you're in immense pain, bam, you are you've been what's it called, you're knocked out. And yeah, no, when they mentioned they ruled out drugs, right, in this conversation.
So they said that no drugs were found in his system.
Yeah, and when I read that, I think I talked about it on stream as well, but I mentioned how if for some reason like he had taken drugs, the forensics team who was performing the autopsy would have been able to see it. And I believe I specifically mentioned if he got injected, if he got like something, if anything would have happened to him, they would have been able to see the needle mark somewhere in his body. Unless for whatever reason he got struck in an area where it's not common, like say the back of his knee. If they got him in a specific tendon or some shit where the needle mark might have not been super visible. But otherwise, it would have been noticeable. So that's when I thought, okay, so this guy wasn't like drugged. And mind you, this is me like after having like binged a good chunk of Dexter within like the past few months, and that's all he does. Like that's how he sneaks up on people, and then he like injects them in the side of his neck. And they even cover that at some point. I was like, okay, well, I assume the forensics department would be able to see a fucking needle mark in the neck or in the arm or wherever, right? The other thing to note is that about Takano, where she's mentioned that she is a nurse, and we later like visit the hospital that's in Hinamizawa, but there's only one, right? And it isn't in Hinamizawa, right? It is like the local hospital.
Yeah, there's a local. It's not even a full hospital. It's just a clinic.
Yeah, it's a clinic.
It's called the Irie Clinic, I think is the name that we get told later.
Right. And it kind of like makes you wonder, well, okay, so either she somehow just got out of med school and decided to move to the mountains and work at a clinic as a nurse, or she's a resident of Hinamizawa. And if she was, why would she be telling us this? Like, why would she be so nonchalant about mentioning the murders? Why would she be super okay with just telling some random kid like, oh yeah, no, there was murders here, this happened and that happened? It really gets the old noggin jogging with some of the stuff that she was telling us, especially considering her position within the village.
Yeah, it's going to be important to remember, I think, like, so we can explain why she has the information, but she's definitely acting very differently. So it's possible like she she had just moved to Hinamizawa recently, and she's like us in the sense that, like you mentioned, maybe she just got out of school and wanted to work, and this was like the only place that could hire her. We don't really know a lot about why she came to Hinamizawa, or if she's been here this whole time. So it's just something like Ryukishi loves planting these little seeds. And you gotta, some of them are not going to grow for probably 30, 40 more hours, but definitely stuff to keep in the back of your mind for sure.
Right.
So before we get into subchapter 8, this is the turning point of the narrative, and a lot is going to happen, and there's a lot that we could theorize on, but it's kind of, I think it's best if I'll go through the summaries in one chunk, and then we can kind of open it up to theorizing at that point.
Right.
Is that cool?
Yeah.
Okay.
One last thing before we move on to 8. One thing that I immediately thought, because to add a little bit to what you mentioned a bit ago regarding back in the summary of the chapter, what specifically happens is we quote unquote, we tell Rena like, hey, I'm gonna go to the bathroom, you follow me later. So we step outside, then the Rena comes out, and we talk the strategy of like, hey, we're gonna cheat, right? The Rena's like, okay. So then Keiichi tells her, look, I'm gonna go wash my face, you go back first, and then I will come in so it's not suspicious. So we know Rena is out of the picture or is walking away. And then the teacher comes and tells us, like, hey, by the way, you have a visitor at the front gate. And we're fucking confused, right? So when I read that, when we got to that point, I thought, okay, we've got a visitor. And then we meet Oishi-san, and Oishi's like, hey, do you want to like talk in my car? There's AC. I was like, okay. There has to be a window from the classroom or from somewhere else in the building where you can see the parking lot from. There is no way that isn't happening in this tiny school. Unless for whatever reason, our classroom is on the opposite side of the building. But then I remembered this is a like one classroom school where it's the teacher teaching mainly like the youngins, and everyone that's like, 14 or whatever or older, like anyone in their teens is like doing self-study or getting help from some of the older kids in the class. And I remembered, okay, well, if that's the case, there's one classroom. That means they can more than likely see the entrance. They can see us going up to a dude that looks like a detective, right? He's got his fucking like overalls, and he's got like a dress shirt. He's got a coat. And then they see us walking with him to a car and getting into it. I am 100% sure that they all saw us. There is no way not a single one of them did not see this. And considering
thinking the same. Sorry to cut you off. I was thinking the same thing because I went to a one-room school, and if somebody had gotten into a car, we would have all known because we would have all known he walked out.
Exactly.
As soon as somebody, like, it's a small community. And it's also a small school. I think everybody kind of has a sense of people's movements in that way.
Exactly. Yep. And even then, in the chapter before, when we were playing zombie tag, like the whole premise, like the main premise of the zombie tag was rumors being spread. So it was a lot like Persona 2, but we were basically just telling kids like, hey, did you hear that like someone's looking for this chick that we're looking for? Can you like tell everyone? And then the rumor spread immediately, and everyone's like, oh my god, like, so and so's like parent is here, they need to find them, can you go check? Like, kids are loud, kids will talk, meaning that if for some reason, right, one of them saw Keiichi like get into a car, they would have been like, oh my god, look, Keiichi's getting into a car, and then everyone would go to the window, right? Like that's what I was thinking the entire time while this is going on. Like there is zero chance not a single person did not see Keiichi get into a car with some stranger of all things, with an outsider of all things.
It's pretty plausible. We don't really learn about the layout of the school. It's not important to the overall mystery really, but we do learn a little bit more about how the school is laid out much, much later. Like I'm talking probably maybe 50 hours from now, roughly. So something like, you probably won't get an answer for that until literally the answer arcs. So,
Mhm.
um, but yeah. So actually, so hold on. Before we start subchapter 8, and we get into the block of what is the really long ending, I want to bring up our first actual piece of side content, which is a bonus arc included in the first original CD pressing of Onikakushi called Rena Punch or Renapon.
Mhm.
And it's an alternate scene from the first day where Mion suggests that they should take Keiichi on a tour um, and have a picnic together. And it's mostly comedy. It's mostly just kind of Ryukishi being silly. But there is one piece of characterization which I needed to wait until Oishi showed up for us to get to this. But so basically, they're walking along and they suggest having a tour of the town, and they're joking together as friends do. At one point, Mion mentions that she hopes that she doesn't have to spread the rumor about Keiichi and Rena at a love hotel, and before she can even finish that sentence, she gets laid out flat by Rena. And Rena was like 2 meters away, I think is how they describe it. So the fact that she was able to punch that fast is like ridiculous. Before Keiichi can even help Mion up, Tomitake shows up with Oishi. Tomitake introduces himself as Tommy, and Oishi introduces himself as Cloud. They say that they are soul brothers, and that they have to help each other out in times like this. So to help Keiichi, they offer to have him use the Rena punching simulator to help him dodge Rena's punches better.
It's so stupid.
After doing all of the training stages that they have set up for him, he finishes the final stage, and Tommy is the first to congratulate Keiichi, and he's like, "I'm going to give you your soul brother name, which is K." And then before we even really get accustomed to his new name, Cloud offers Kei a gift, and he states that, and this is the part that I think is just a good bit of characterization for Oishi. He states that achieving a goal is a great feat, but the loss of a goal can be disheartening. And it's to set up the punchline that, you've unlocked endless mode and you can just play the game as much as you want now. But this stands out to me a lot because we don't know a lot about Oishi, even by the end of this chapter. We just know he's a cop and we know he's investigating Hinamizawa. So this is like one of the very few instances in Onikakushi where we get to see a little bit of like who Oishi is. He is a cop, and he can act like a bad cop sometimes, or like at least a slimy cop. But he this is like peeling back the curtain a little bit. So
we see a more lighthearted side of him as as we're now soul brothers.
But yeah, just that line just really stuck out to me about the absence of a goal. Because it is kind of like he talks, and we'll get to it later, but he's going to be retiring from the force soon, and so I think that he's, again, even if it's a comedic scene, that's probably something he's actually feeling in that moment.
Right.
All right, so subchapter 8 is the turning point of the narrative.
Yes. Oh god, this caught me off guard.
I am going to try to get through a good chunk of the exposition before we start really theorizing, because again, just there's some things that almost immediately get either answered or built on in following subchapters. So we're stressed at school today, or Keiichi is stressed at school today, so he tries to take a stress nap at his desk but can't seem to fall asleep. Because he can't fall asleep, he overhears his friends talking about Tomitake's disappearance. He can't make out what they're saying completely, but the fact that he's only catching certain words, and the words that he does hear are suspicious, just it makes him more suspicious of his friends. Weirdly enough, they choose to play Clue again, which is, I guess it's just because he couldn't finish out the game completely. But he when he's trying to help set up the game, he notices that there's an unused suspect card for a kid named Satoshi. And there's not a kid named Satoshi in their class, so that's weird.
Mhm.
But before he can even ask who Satoshi is, Rena asks him to help clean up the classroom before they start their game. During the cleaning, he asks Rena about it, and she gives him the usual, I don't know. Her behavior is really
just moved
freaking
in, bro.
cagey out today. Yeah, exactly. Her behavior is especially freaking him out today. So he tries. Oh, excuse me. I skipped a paragraph. On the way home from school, Keiji tries to bring up Satoshi again with Rena. Rena says that she doesn't know anything again, which completely floors Keiji. He complains about her keeping things from him, but she retorts that she retorts by asking if he's been hiding things of his own. Her behavior is really freaking Keiji out, so he tries to proceed with the conversation until the famous scene. She screams at him, calling him a liar.
Mhm.
Rena knows the guy we're talking to is suspicious, which sends her into a rant about keeping secrets and how it's natural for even friends to keep things from each other. Which, that as a concept is interesting because that gets touched upon a lot.
Mhm.
But we'll get back to that later. She quickly snaps back to her normal demeanor and says they should continue walking home. Later at home that night, Keiichi gets a call from Oishi. He uses this opportunity to ask about Onikakushi and how the villagers use that term to refer to the people who go missing around the time of the festival. We finally learn that someone did actually go missing on the 4th year. It was a boy from the home of the Hojo housewife who died in year 3, or sorry, in year 4. It's revealed that the boy's name is Satoshi Hojo. So we know for a fact now that this kid is related to Satoko somehow.
Mhm.
Keiichi says that he thinks Rena may believe that she's going to be the next curse victim. After hearing this, Oishi asks us to keep an eye on her. Our call gets interrupted by Dad, who brings us tea. He brings us 2 glasses, actually. He brought it up because Rena showed up a little while ago and asked where Keiichi's room was, except she never showed up in Keiichi's room. This absolutely sends Keiichi into a panic, thinking Rena overheard the entire phone conversation. Only one tips this time, which is an internal police memo that reveals the police are treating this curse like a series of serial killings and not like separate incidents.
Mhm. This
There's
was something
some
great.
stuff to unpack, but
Yeah.
I want to get into subchapter 9 because it greatly coincides with this one.
Yeah. Because when I was playing through this, I was like, I need to learn more, and then
Right.
chapter 9 goes a lot more into it. So yeah, let's cover both.
Keiichi skips school today, claiming to be sick, so he goes to the Irie clinic instead, which that is the first time that's named. It's always been the clinic or a nurse at the clinic. Yeah. At the clinic, Keiichi immediately leaves after hearing the lobby people only talking about the curse. It's just he's like, I need to get away from this. On the way home, he bumps into Oishi. Oishi says the police have hit a wall with Tomitake, ultimately landing on some kind of unknown drug being the cause for him clawing his throat out. So this is the first time that he's like contradicting what the autopsy says. Oishi takes us to a restaurant where the waitresses wear cute outfits because that's important to him. While eating, he tells us an old story about the demonic inhabitants of ancient Hinamizawa, which is when they name drop that it was actually Onikakushi.
Mhm.
The ancient villagers were considered to be man-eating demons who could cure any illness in exchange for eating the flesh of a human as payment. So basically, if you bring your sick kid to the village, they'll heal your kid, but they'll eat you. We ultimately land back on modern day and how the villagers might still be perpetuating the tradition of these demon hunts. When the 4th year occurred and a child went missing, Oishi had background checks run on the 4 girls in our class because every other person who had gone missing was an adult. So this is the first time a kid went missing. The first victim had a direct physical altercation with Mion a few weeks before he died. The second victims were Satoko's parents. So if Satoshi was living with the other family, maybe they're not brother and sister, they could be cousins. Satoko was with them when it happened, so it's possible she might have pushed them. The third victims were Rika's parents, so another confirmation that the Furudes are definitely related to Rika. But we already knew about this one since there's only one shrine in the village and only one family of priests. So just something that we can kind of infer. from previous knowledge.
Mm.
The fourth victim was Satoko's aunt. Her aunt and uncle had custody of her ever since the second year when her parents died. At this point, we know for a fact that Satoshi is related, but Oishi spells it out for us. He is her older brother. Oishi asserts every victim is related to our friends somehow, but Keiichi points out the contradiction that Rena wasn't related to any of them. Unfortunately, he informs us that Rena has a history of violence at her school. She was suspended from her old school for breaking all the windows with a baseball bat and injuring 3 kids in the process. The diagnosis that followed Rena after that incident was one of dysautonomia. She was put on meds and didn't return from her suspension, ultimately moving back to Hinamizawa shortly after. Rena's medical records indicate she believed she was seeing Oyashiro-sama quite a bit. This confuses Keiichi until Oishi reveals that she's not actually an outsider. She used to live in Hinamizawa, only moving to Ibaraki for a short while before returning. Keiichi asks why Oishi even bothered telling all this to him, annoyed that all of this new doubt of his friends is being thrust upon him. Oishi responds quite plainly that he's retiring this year and wanted to push as hard as possible to solve the case of the curse, especially since the chief's stance on the curse has begun to change. Oishi thinks that the chief is asking him to stop his investigation due to some pressure from someone within Hinamizawa. After their meeting, Keiichi goes home to nap. He's woken up by a phone call. It's Mion asking if he's okay. She says everyone is worried and asks if now is a good time to visit. Grandma made some excess mochi and she thinks sharing a treat will help make Keiichi feel better faster. Mion shows up with Rena, but both seem worried. Mion gets the same glazed over eyes when she asks Keiichi what he had for lunch. I meant to put the same glazed over eyes as Rena, but yeah, it's just, yeah, she's looking like Rena right now. Mion talks like she knows he was with Oishi, which freaks him out. After being thoroughly spooked, Keiichi is left behind by the girls with the mochi. Keiichi thinks the girls are trying to send him a warning that he shouldn't do anything unnecessary, but he thinks that there should be no way that there's no way that they could have any kind of ulterior motives. This back and forth breaks him down until he realizes something. Things didn't get weird until he started digging. When he started to learn the truth, the others involved, like Tomitake and Takano, started to die. There must be a reason for the villagers had to kill Tomitake. After spiraling for a bit, Keiichi's mood returns to normal. He says he isn't frightened by his friends and should probably eat the mochi they prepared for him. The mochi is delicious. Keiichi thoroughly enjoys sampling each one. He's only taking one bite at a time to see if he can tell which one is Rena's. After sampling each, he believes that maybe hers has some extra filling, and that's how he can tell. After taking another bite, he eventually feels a needle in one of them. Keiichi quickly spits the mochi out and throws it across the room before he can even swallow the needle. He also threw each of the others at the wall to scatter their contents. Instead of inspecting each one, Keiichi ran upstairs out of fear and tries to go to sleep. We get 2 tips for this subchapter. The first is about the police force theorizing about a drug that can make someone kill themselves. One officer says it's possible that a drug could induce extreme swings of depression and mania, which would drive someone to suicide nearly instantly. The second outlines how the Sonozakis have ties to the national diet. This causes Oishi to realize the sudden shift in the chief's attitude is probably due to pressure from the Sonozakis and or their political connections.
Right. And once again,
so this kind of
the national
together what. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no. The national diet once again is a body of government in Japan. It's something that I bring up anytime it's brought up, just so people don't get confused by the name. By the way, continue.
Yeah, this is one where, and one of the reasons I wanted to continue reading multiple blocks at a time from here is because Oishi starts to tell us things in subchapter 8, but he really comes driving it home in subchapter 9. We learn everything he's trying to tell us.
Right. So going back to, I guess, 8 real quick. This is the chapter with the iconic Rena scene where when she's talking to us, when we start probing some more and we bring up Satoshi, and she's like, well, it's normal for friends to, keep secrets from each other. I believe at that point her eyes lose the pupils. So if you look at the, the characters that we have on screen, they all have, they have a little white dot in their eye. They have a little shine in them. when she brings this up, her eyes change and they become, glazed over. It's like she's changed. And when I saw that, immediately in my mind, I'm like, she has a dark passenger. Like, just immediately, because again, I've been watching Dexter, and it's fucking funny. And when she yells out at us, when she calls us a liar, when she yells out "Usoda," she screams it. And I rewatched the scene yesterday, and the mic peaks on purpose. I'm pretty sure.
Yep. Yes.
It peaks on purpose to kind of freak you out, and it's because it's the first time there's ever been, mic peaking for one. I believe there has been yelling, but not like angry yelling before. With like Keiji, like just doing just manly things, right? Like he talks like a typical young lad protagonist, the way one would in an anime, and he does yell some things out, like he does yell out some insults or whatever, but it's never, his mic is never peaking. Like the sound quality is always great, and here's the first time where it freaks you the fuck out. Rena's sprite is like pissed. She is angry as fuck. Because at first she's like a little upset and she looks cute with like she's like a little angry, and then her eyes change and then she fucking yells at you, and it gets fucking creepy. It gets really fucking creepy, and then that's when we learn later on, like, oh yeah, by the way, she has problems.
Yeah, exactly. I would say that even though they're set up as separate sub chapters, I think 8 and 9 are like paired. They should be paired together on purpose, just because there's so much that like informs one another. Like obviously the whole story is going to inform itself eventually, but yeah, just I think those two in particular are very linked. And keeping with that theme, actually, 10, 11, and 12 are very interesting because there's not a ton that happens in terms of like progressing the mystery. There are a couple clues here and there, but it's mostly just
World building.
It's Keiichi's complete and utter descent into distrusting the people around him.
Or character building, I mean.
Yeah. Which is like if 8 and 9 were paired together to set up like Keiichi learning about everything that's going on. 10, 11, and 12 are a great ending to like where he would be mentally right now. And actually, in the interest of time, because I am running out of time shortly, I'm gonna quickly go through the important bits of 10, 11, and 12, and if we need to reference any of that when we get to the theorizing section, we can do that.
Sure.
For 10, most of the chapter is just Keiichi overanalyzing whether or not his friends are actually trying to kill him. Keiichi leaves a note in his room on the backside of his clock, and hopes his parents or the cops will posthumously discover it. So basically, hey, if I die, bury me with my clock, because that's I really like that clock. And we also learned that Oishi is referred to as Oyashiro-sama's messenger because anytime he shows up, someone disappears, which is not alarming at all. The next day, after doing basically nothing but doubting his friends the whole day, Keiichi is almost run over by a villager's car. He hurries to set up his fortress by grabbing a bat at the school and holing up in the Maibara manor. Oishi calls for a status check once he's home, and Keiichi can't. He asks for some evidence about what's going on. Keiichi can't find the needle to submit as evidence, and then when he asks about the car, he also can't remember the license plate. Yep, exactly. So Oishi is like, you gotta have some evidence for me, kid. He begs Oishi to help him anyway, and Oishi kind of reluctantly agrees. But during this phone call, Rena shows up, and this is a fun scene because she shows up asking to come inside to talk initially, and then later she asks him if he had dinner, and he's like, "Yeah, mom's making dinner right now," which is just a flat out lie. And she knows that it's a lie because she calls him out on not just the fact that he's home alone, but the fact, like the exact meal he ate down to the flavor of cup noodle,
Right.
which obviously freaks him out. Like at this point, he's at his breaking point, so he tries to slam the door, but fails to realize that Rena's fingers are in the door frame because she's been trying to get in. So he slams the door in her fingers repeatedly. Um, this kind of brings Rena back to her quote unquote normal self. Because she tells him that it hurts and like begs him to stop. After a little bit of struggling, she finally gets free. He slams the door and locks it, runs up to the room, gets back on the phone with Oishi, and Oishi reveals that he's starting to think that the curse might actually be real.
Mm.
When Keiichi does a little bit of hesitation to that, he kind of laughs it off and was like, haha, yeah, right. So we don't really know where Oishi stands on this, because like obviously he's been investigating this for a while.
Yeah.
But
he says something along the lines of like, sorry for bringing it up. I didn't mean to worry you with the curse thing.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, I think he's getting a better read on Keiichi, and he's just trying to not send him into a panic.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the call, though, we see Rena is still standing outside, right in front of the house, and she's in the rain with no umbrella, and she's just mouthing the words "I'm sorry" over and over again.
But we don't know that yet. We don't know that yet. He doesn't have the epiphany until the end.
So we get two tips this time. The first one is just a basic description of different ways that a split personality can manifest.
Yeah.
And the second one is from earlier when Keiichi was picking out instant ramen at the grocery store with his parents. He picks a flavor that Rena called out earlier, which is the evidence she had for him being home alone. The scene breaks, and we cut to Keiichi. It's basically him reminiscing about being at the store, and he's like he's racking his brain about how anyone could have like been there to watch him or hear about which flavor he picked. And ultimately he lands on, oh right, I did hear someone. I heard an extra set of footsteps behind me. He's like, I wonder who was tip tapping behind me the whole time. So not alarming at all.
Right.
Keiichi again falls asleep due to stress. He's in and out all night though, because he's just super paranoid at this point. He decides that it's probably best to go to school to keep up appearances. So he does go to school. Mion is really the only one that kind of talks to him that day. She urges him to stop swinging the bat in a metaphorical sense, because she warns him that the things that he's doing are exactly the same things that Satoshi did a while ago, which is the first time we get compared, or Keiichi gets compared to Satoshi.
Yeah.
After that point, we do have a big fight with Mion. We make her cry. We see a side of Mion we've never seen before. We actually see two sides of Mion we've never seen before, because she breaks down crying. And then later, once we reveal that it was Oishi who made us suspicious of her, she freaks out and was like, I knew I should have killed him like long ago. After that big fight, they try to act like school is normal. And this is something that we were talking about quite a few subchapters back, about him coming to this school and feeling like refreshed, or coming to this town and feeling refreshed, in that he's sitting in school not talking to anybody because his only friends are like, he's ostracizing himself from them basically. And he thinks about how no, this is what school is supposed to feel like. It's been a while since I felt like this. Maybe this is good for me. And so he spends the whole day being antisocial. He leaves and goes home, but Rena is right behind him with the axe. And it initially starts out with him, continuing to walk so she can't catch up with him. And they have a conversation about what she's doing, why she's following him. He eventually starts running, like just actually running away from Rena. And she catches up a few times, but she never like gets him in a position where like she's going to kill him. But she tells him that she promises he will not be transferred, because she's the only person who understands what Keiichi is going through, and she won't let things end up like Satoshi. After some more chasing, we eventually lose her for a little bit and get to the landfill, where we see two other villagers walking around. Keiichi is just happy to see literally anyone else because they're a third party. That is until they see him and start chasing him.
Until he remembers where the fuck he's at.
Yeah.
He's like, oh yeah,
He,
this town.
After a futile attempt to run away, he gets gut punched and put into a chokehold, and he blacks out. He wakes up with with Rena over him in his bedroom, and he is very confused because she's like nursing him essentially. And she tells him, yeah, I found you like unconscious alone in the ditch, and I don't know why you were there. And she said that, don't worry, I've already called the doctor and I've called Mion. And Mion shows up.
Did she mention Mion?
Oh, sorry. She doesn't mention that she called Mion, but Mion shows up, and then it's said that she was the one who called Mion.
Yeah.
After that part. But yeah, so she tells Keiichi that she's called a doctor. The doctor's on the way. Doorbell rings.
And we think it's the doctor, and then it's Mion.
Think it's the doctor, but it's Mion. Yep. It's revealed that she also called Mion over. And during this process, Mion says, well, it's time to continue. Are you ready for your punishment? And the punishment is he doesn't know exactly what's going on yet, but Rena is like essentially pinning him down. She's holding him back. And while Mion is prepping this punishment, Mion asks Rena if she has invited the director or called the director over. And Rena goes, of course. And so that, of course, freaks Keiichi out even further because he's like, why would a word like director be applicable to Hinamizawa? There's nobody here that's a director. And the only thing he can land on is the director of the damn construction site. But he's been long dead, so why would they be calling him?
Right.
So he's just at a point where he doesn't know what to think anymore. He's just going through all these thoughts in his head, like he is freaking out, for lack of a better term. He is completely spiraling. After hearing all this, Mion pulls out a syringe-like object and tells Keiichi that it's time for his punishment. And so he asks what's going on. She says, oh, you know exactly what's going on. The same thing that happened to Tomitake is going to happen to you. And so that, of course, just he goes ballistic. He blacks out. The scene cuts, and when we wake up, we are in a room alone. Nobody's here, which is great. He wakes up, and he's like, I need to figure out what's going on. Then he looks down, and he sees that the remains of Mion and Rena are there after being beaten to death with a bat.
Which he's holding in his right hand.
Which he's, yep, exactly. And God, he realizes now that he needs to figure out a plan. He needs to get in contact with Oishi somehow. And before he can do that, he sees the white van outside, which is the exact same car that tried to run him over a couple days prior. And out of the car pops a guy in a white lab coat with 4 other individuals, and they're just kind of like waiting at the entrance of the house. He suspects that it could have been the doctor, but the guy who hopped out of the car looks nothing like a doctor. Like, he's wearing a coat, but he doesn't look like one. So as Keiichi's last stand, he decides, I'm going to update my posthumous note. I'm going to put some information, Mion and Rena were the culprits. Here's the syringe that Mion had. And he tapes this on the back, throws it back up on the clock, and then essentially makes a break for it. Of course, the entire time he's swimming in thoughts of just like, he's trying to piece together what's going on, but he's going so fast that he's essentially incomprehensible at this point. He's rambling. He's thinking about every single possibility. He eventually runs far enough away and finds a telephone booth that he calls Oishi. He's like screaming
Slurring.
and vomiting. Yeah, he's in a bad way right now. and he once he gets Oishi on the phone, Oishi's like, "Who's the culprit? Who's the culprit?" And he just can't get it out. He's like, "They're behind me, but I don't want to turn around. I can't turn around."
He's like, just turn around, bro. Look, who is it?
Yep. When Oishi realizes that there's not enough people to get over to the phone booth in time, he zooms out there like he's never driven faster. And then quickly, we're introduced briefly to Kuma. Kuma-chan is his subordinate at the force. That's the last character introduction of this arc. But him and Kuma rush out to the scene. Unfortunately, they are too late. Keiji is found inside the phone booth with his throat clawed out. At the end, when the police are talking about their report, we learn that Keiji is treated like he is a murder suspect, that he is responsible for the murder of Mion and Rena. And when they were investigating his bedroom, they found a note that was taped to the back of the clock. But it looks like, because it was in two pieces, it looks like there are some lines missing, like someone had torn out a piece of the note.
A chunk of the page, yeah.
And they never mentioned the syringe. So it's very clear that someone messed with the note. Someone knew that a note was there and messed with it. And that's how the main first chapter ends.
Well, the last thing to add to that is that, like, while Keiichi's clawing at his throat, Oishi also kind of goes, he's trying to say something, but I can't hear him. And then he hyper focuses, and he's able to make out the word, "I'm sorry."
Yep. Yeah.
Before, like, Keiichi just stops responding because the call gets cut because of the payphone.
Yep.
That's like one of the last, like, super important things. Because my God.
I don't know if it was just because of the backgrounds that they were using, but was that the same phone booth that they had found? Tomitake also died in a phone booth, didn't he?
No, he died in a
Or
field.
was it just on the side of the road?
He died on the side of the road.
Side of the road.
Okay,
He died
so it might have just been the same background that they used.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Because he died specifically where the road stops being gravel and becomes concrete in the mountain. Man, this is there's so much that happens just at the end. It is incredible, like how it's just thrown at you, and it makes you. It like I said, it gets the noggin jogging as to like what the fuck is going on. It makes you question everything. It makes you question everyone. So like who's doing this, who's doing that. It's making you question everything.
And speaking of questioning things, before we get into your theorizing segment, I actually kept a list of all of the ongoing mystery, well, most of the ongoing mysteries. It's not everything, but and there's a reason for that. But the ones I have listed down are: who were the 6 people involved in the dismemberment of 1979? Why exactly did the dam project not go through? Because that's never fully explained. It's just unity. Where is the dismemberment ringleader hiding, or is he even still alive? What exactly happened to the victims on the annual Onikakushi? So basically, the ones who got demoned away, are they also alive? Are they hiding? Are they dead? Who was beating Tomitake? Is the curse real, or are these just human-perpetrated serial killings like the police believe them to be? Where did the needle go? Who is the director? And where did the syringe and missing note lines go? And those are the main things that we can still theorize on right now.
Right. Okay. So I guess before we get into my theories, with the 6 people, that's quite something. Because it's like, obviously it was villagers, right? They had to be part of the village. As for who, I don't believe we get enough hints to know who they are, but my guess would also tie into the second mystery. Why didn't the dam project go through? And I'm pretty sure it's Mion's family, the Sonozaki family, that's involved, or that wasn't, because we learned that Mion was involved in the revolt against the dam. She was heavily involved with the dam project. She has a criminal record from it, and we learned that I believe it was like her grandma or like someone in her family is very close to either the mayor or someone in politics. I forget off the top of my head. So we know that for sure the Sonozaki were involved, and it's more than likely that at that point, you know, it was when they all kind of changed and they all became like, all right, well, we got to keep this pack of silent. I'm gonna cut his fucking head off. You all take a piece and start cutting, and then hide him. I believe so. I'm pretty sure the Sonozakis are, of course, involved in the dismemberment. As for where the ringleader is, I mean, for all we know, it is Mion. For all we know, or not. They mentioned that they couldn't catch him. I believe they specifically say him. They couldn't catch him. So, yeah, not sure where he could be, or if he's maybe just living in a basement somewhere in the village, you know, in plain sight. Where he, because I was thinking about that. I was like, what if he's just living with one of the residents, and they just like bring him food and stuff, and he's just there hiding forever, or he just went off into the mountains and is just there in like some shrine maybe. As for the victims themselves or the Onikakushi, that I'm still thinking about. It could be that they're all dead, or they're all being kept in some dungeon for like sacrifices. That's my guess. Because they mention how Oyashiro is I call him a guard dog, but then they're like he's like a warden. And I'm like, oh right, that's a better word. So he's like a warden. So it could be that they are trying to, maybe they sacrifice someone to him each year so that the Oni don't get out, right? So that's my guess. That's my guess as to like what happens to them. Who was beating Tomitake? That I'm not sure. I'm guessing it's whoever, well, obviously whoever killed him, right? So I'm thinking it could have been the other protagonists.
Well, I mean, he clawed his own throat out, so
yeah, but he was beaten before. So
yeah.
like whoever beat him, I assume would have been, it could have been either the girls that we hung out with, all the other pro tags, or the people who were with the white van at the end of chapter 12, right? It could have been them as well. I don't remember if they mentioned anything about tire marks in the vicinity. I don't think they did. I think they only mentioned the bike being far away. So the dude was chased for 300 meters. So that's quite a bit. It's a hefty distance. So they fucking chased the shit out of him. And then they beat him to a pulp. And then he clawed his throat out. As for is the curse real, or are these just a human? That's part of my theory, so I'll go with that later. Where did the needle go? That I'm not sure. I think. Well, I'm pretty sure, like, because when Keiichi like leaves his home, a dude is like, there he is, and then he fucking books it. We don't know who stayed behind. Like, for all we know, like one of the other like villagers or dudes from the van like just stayed behind, and they're like, well, check everything, check his room, check his house, make sure there's nothing here. And then they find the note, and then that's when they tear the bit of the page out. They take the needle with them, or I'm pretty sure they took the needle and then they used it on him.
So when I say needle, I mean the mochi needle.
Oh fucking hell, dude. That I'm not sure. Because Keiichi tried looking for it as well. He dug through the trash. He couldn't find it. He tried his best. He just couldn't see it. So not sure, really not sure where the needle went. The director is probably, again, either someone from the Sonozaki family or, I'm pretty sure he's some dude that's tied to them. And then here's the syringe, right? So that's my I'm pretty sure they used the syringe on him. As for the actual needle, not sure. But now...
And then, before we get into your big theories, just to go over the cast review. The cast review is a common thing in these chapters. It's basically all the people, or all the characters acting just like, acting like themselves, almost like a blooper reel of sorts, but they go into what they think about what happened. Everyone has a slightly different theory, but it ultimately, like, they fall into the two camps of Team Human or Team Demon. And that's really, like, all we know, because all we can theorize on is just, is it human perpetrators or is it demons? At the end, Keiichi is the only one with a theory that stands out because he says that it has to be both. Because humans wouldn't act in such an antisocial manner without some kind of demonic curse befalling them.
Right.
So his is very interesting in the sense of like, it's human perpetrated, but it's only human perpetrated because the demons are real.
Yeah.
And that's basically all the information we're given, and all the mysteries we have. So did you have anything else that you wanted to theorize on specifically?
No, I think I covered it more in my theories. So we'll get to that, unless you mean anything else that isn't like main, like theory involving like the main mystery.
No, I want to hear exactly what your theories are.
All right, so now we go into this. All right, so you guys might need to mute yourselves for this, because I mean, just me saying a few things a bit ago, I can tell you guys have bad poker faces. So immediately they both mute. Okay, so I'll just talk for a bit. I'll go into I have 4 theories as to like what could be going on. So I'll go one by one, and then you guys can just unmute and be like, yep, okay, because I know that's gonna happen. So before I get into them, the main thing that I always had in the back of my mind was what type of world this is, because anime in general, they're either based on reality, or it's a more fictitious magic exists, that sort of shit, right? So this could either be a hyper realistic, normal like murder mystery, right? By that I mean there is a killer, right? There is a killer. It's just some psycho, and they're the one that kind of convinced everyone to do this, and it's just mob mentality. Or it could be one where no, demons are real, or onis are real. These ogres actually did exist. They do exist, and they like the god, the god himself is real. He does watch over the village, and it is in actual presence, right? So it could be either or, and depending on which it is, which I'll find out later. Again, this is the prologue. We won't know, or I won't know. You guys already know. So I have, like I said, I have 4 theories. So theories number 1 is that Keiichi was murdered by villagers. After they raided his home, they tampered with the note, they chased him down to the booth, and they injected him, and he killed himself by clawing at his throat. The drug made him hallucinate, or not hallucinate, but made him go into a frenzy, and that's what caused him to claw at his throat. Now, like I said, this could be a fake, because a coroner who found them and did the autopsy, which happens in the report later, they mentioned like he clawed his throat out and all this stuff. I don't remember if they mentioned a drug or not. But if that were the case, they would have found a needle poking somewhere. Because again, forensics doesn't really overlook this shit unless they sucked in the 80s, especially in Japan. I don't know. So that's theory 1. Theory 2 is that the curse is real, but the curse isn't really a curse. It's more like the people in the village, or those who act these crimes out, have a multiple personality disorder, or they have BPD, or something that causes them to act out. Like there's something in the Hinamizo water that's turning all the children into killers, right? It's something along those lines. That's theory 2, which would coincide with, theory 1. Theory 3 is that Keiichi was hallucinating the entire time. All of this is one hallucination. And he is just paranoid after hearing about all the events, and that everything just kind of happens to be a coincidence. Like when like everything that's been happening, it seems to affect any, or at least some of the past like characters like Satoshi, where he was basically doing the exact same thing as Satoshi, and Rena kept saying, I'm going to protect you. I'm going to make sure you don't get demoned away. Right? So it could be that literally at the end, when Mion and Rena were, because Rena was holding Keiichi back, like she had his hands behind his back and was restraining him, and Mion was like, "It's time for your punishment game, haha," and then she pulls out a needle. I thought they were gonna knock him out, and they actually did call a doctor, and the white van was for some mental institute, right? That's possibly one of the things that could have happened, where he's literally just gone insane, because by this point he is hallucinating, he is seeing shadows, like creepy shit happens. Yeah, like Rena stalks him literally to his home. She follows him home without him being able to hear her. When he locks his door, he feels a presence, or not, when he's taking his shoe off at his like entrance, he feels a shadow, he feels a force behind him, and he just grabs his bat and swings as hard as he can. So it's like, at this point, it's either the curse again being like a real thing, where it could be either something that changes people, or there's literally like spirits and shit, or at this point he's literally just fucking insane. He's fucking lost it, because of, again, he's seeing shadows, he's hearing noises, he's sleep deprived by the final chapter. He could not get any sleep. He slept with his futon at his door, and he was just fucking like dozing off every now and again. So it could be that he was just hallucinating all of the bad shit, due to like just that kind of being mentally broken to some extent. And the final theory, which I'd be fucking surprised if this is even like legit, if this is true, but Keiichi can time travel. And he's stuck in like a Groundhog Day scenario. Anytime he just like stops time like Dio, it's him making like a new choice in the timeline, as he's trying not to like get caught or do something wrong like in a past scenario. And he can somehow warn his past self like of these events and how they're gonna happen. And it's him trying to figure out like what the hell's going on as he goes back in time. That is my assumption, because remember, at least this is something that I walked into kind of already knowing, not really, but it can be inferred just mainly by looking at the game. Because like, if you kill off the protagonist, the fuck is gonna happen in the second game, right? Like, all right, cool, he got murdered. Like, are we just gonna see like the day-to-day lives of everyone else like after the murder? And then in the character review, they mention, oh well, he's the protagonist for the second script, he's gotta like read it. So obviously he comes back in the second game. As for how that happens, I don't know. My guess is, again, that he can... I talked about this at the end of the stream, where before the finale, so part 6, where I mentioned how there are people out there, and I won't go too much into it, there are people out there who all of a sudden have a flash of inspiration out of nowhere, and it is believed to be caused by traumatic or severe or specific events that happen in the future or in their future, which impacts them so much that a version of themselves in the past has a dream about it, or they think about it for a second, like it comes into their mind and they start doing things. This has happened with some authors before, where they read something so impactful in the future that they start writing about it in the past. Where they just like they write an entire novel out in the past. And I believe that could be happening with Keiichi. There are times where he will just think about things, and then he'll be like, no, I gotta focus, I gotta pause the tape player or the tape in my mind, and I gotta rewind and crank up the volume and listen carefully. And I feel like that's more than likely what's happening. Something incredibly traumatizing happens in the future, and it hits him in that moment in the past, and he's able to kind of like warn himself about what's going on. So my guess as to what's going to happen in the rest of the series is that he's eventually probably going to stop himself from being deemed in the way, or stop everyone from being deemed in the way, and help Oishi-san to some extent to kind of like solve the mystery. That's one possibility. Or it's going to be one of those where we get to the point where we find out who the killer is, but then of course Keiichi gets fucking axed at the end. and you're left with some final crumbs to kind of know who the killer was, and you should be able to like piece it together by that point. So those would be like my theories as to like what's going on right now. So you guys, if you're not laughing, you can unmute yourselves and let me know what you think.
Yeah, I think so. For your sake, I'm not going to comment on any of the theories in particular, just because like I don't want to.
Influence me.
I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to influence you. I don't want to make you think that any of them are close or any of them are like completely off base, because like then that's gonna cause you to lean into one theory or the other like harder. Yeah.
I'm gonna be disappointed and then be like, "Fuck this game." The second the first chapter, the first real non-prologue didn't answer my questions. Let's stop this fucking series right now. Keiichi can't time travel. What the fuck?
So
It's so stupid.
the what I will say is it's good to keep these theories in your back pocket, just because you'll get a chance to read them whenever you start the game. The difficulty messages, or when you start getting into the answer arcs, is when Ryukishi specifically calls you out for like, hey, have you figured this out yet? You should be able to figure this out. So just hold on to any theory that you have, and even if it seems ridiculous, just because you never know when a new piece of information is gonna confirm or deny that.
Right, and that's why I said I don't know what kind of world this is. If it's based on reality, or if say shit like time travel is real, or if the Onis are real. I did talk a little bit about how there could be a sacrifices going on that would tie to like one of these at some point, where that's kind of what happens, and we might discover like, hey, fucking people get sacrificed. This Zonosaki family is fucked up. They're the ones behind all this shit. They're the ones that wrangle them up and keep them in dungeons and torture them or some shit. I don't know. That could be it. It might not be. But that's why it's like it all depends on how grounded this whole story is. But I can only find that out as the game goes on with the other chapters. The second I start seeing Keiichi talk to spirits, I'll be like, okay, ghosts are real. so now I can. He goes to a graveyard. He talks to some fucking spirit. Now okay. So that's this type of world, right? At that point, it'll be solid evidence.
So I will. I again, not commenting on the theory specifically, but after hearing what you had to say and like how you analyzed the story, I'm very excited for you to start Watanagashi. So I'm excited that you're going to be doing that on, I think you said Thursday, right?
Yeah, we're starting that on Thursday.
Cool. So with that in mind, actually, I'd like to close out the discussion with reading the preview blurb from Steam for Watanagashi, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, unless Nadia has anything that she wants to like bring up or mention.
I think having an open mind with your theories is really good. Like everything you said was exactly the kind of thinking you should approach Higurashi with. I did it again. Okay. Yeah.
It's okay.
Just considering that you don't know what kind of world this is set in, that's exactly the direction and pretty much the only takeaway you can have from Onikakushi at this point.
Yep.
Unless I already like solved the fucking mystery and you guys are like just keeping quiet, you'd be like, this guy's a fucking genius. Look at this guy. Unique, fresh take on the Higurashi. Finally, unlike all these Reddit idiots that
all I will say to that is that if you could solve Higurashi on the first arc, it would be a much less interesting series.
No, for sure. Because at that point, it's like, wait, okay, like I get to chapter 1, I'm like, oh, all my theories are proven. Why the fuck would I keep playing this?
So for Watanagashi, it's also set in the 58th year of Showa, early summer. It's the same time period. It's June, and the summer heat has arrived earlier than it does most years. By day, there are crickets, and by night, there are cicadas. We're in Hinamizawa, a small village in the countryside. There are fewer than 2,000 people here, but every year there is an event. This event is a mysterious death. On a certain day in June, someone dies and someone else goes missing. The series of deaths is connected to the upheaval surrounding the dam construction project. A murder case was covered up. A murder case that was covered up is being reenacted. Is it a conspiracy, a coincidence, or perhaps a curse? Someone who was supposed to be there isn't. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there is. Someone who was alive last night is dead now, and someone who is here right now isn't alive. So there is no way to avert this tragedy. There is no choice but to give up. But don't give up. Only you can stand up to this.
Oh my fucking god! Like that immediately gets the gears turning. And now, I mean, I'll mute myself for stream, but
Is that what they're saying?
is it what they're saying? I don't know. I guess I'll have to find out on Thursday when we start the next chapter.
Oh yeah, that's the preview blurb. So that's what you have to look forward to going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's why it's like it's pretty interesting. It's very, very cool. One thing that I did forget to touch up on, I don't remember what call it was with Oishi-san, but at some point we bring up, oh yeah, how come like whenever someone dies, someone goes missing, and then that's when he's like, oh shit, you're right. I never pieced that together. I don't know if he's lying to us or not, but at that point you're kind of like, huh, that's fucking weird. And then that's when we get a little bit more into like what's been going on. That's why I kept thinking that the characters are involved in some way, shape, or form. Like the other protagonists are involved in some way, shape, or form. Because remember, it's like you had like Rika's parents. All of a sudden, fucking like one dies, one goes insane. It's like, well, when we were playing Clue, I was like, these are all gonna be foreshadowings of like what the fuck, like killings that are gonna happen in the future. I fucking guarantee it. I fucking guarantee it. They're like, oh, it's Rika in the kitchen with a knife. And I'm like, that's gonna happen. That's gonna happen. She's like, no, I would use poison. And I'm like, you'd use poison, huh? You'd use
So you've
fucking
thought about
poison.
this.
Yeah, so you've thought about this, huh? You fucking gremlin. I know what you're fucking. I know what you're doing to me, Ryukashi. I know what's going on. So, so it's like as soon as we got to that, I was like, yeah, this for sure. It's like it's all foreshadowing. But yeah, I don't know
Well,
if you guys have any final thoughts, or like when you were playing like this game for the first time, like if you guys had some thoughts for around that time.
God, when I first played Onikakushi, I ashamedly I skipped the tips, so there was a lot of information I probably could have pieced together a little bit more easily.
Mhm.
But even with everything I was given, um, starting Watanagashi and knowing that it takes place at the exact same time as Onikakushi in terms of like an actual like world timeline perspective was really what kind of that, and the missing syringe were what threw me over the edge, and I was just like, I needed to see what happened next.
Yeah, and luckily for you, you're not streaming it. So even if I like, as much as I wanted to keep playing the fucking game, I'm like, I got work in like 40 minutes. I can't fucking like continue. I have to hold on to like these thoughts. I can't voice them out properly. God, I wanted to like start streaming this specific game like on weekends, just to be able to just play it for like 7-8 hours and then just do that instead. But I'm like, no, we'll keep it bite sized like this, and then I could pace it out properly. Because otherwise, man, it's a good thing I left that finale for the end. Like you told me, you're like, oh, it's gonna be like 2.5 hours. I'm like, all right, let me start an hour and a half earlier before I normally do, just in case. And then it fucking went on. It went on for like 3 hours. Holy fuck.
Well, especially too, because you're taking your time to read all of the unvoiced lines, which does add a little bit of extra time.
Yeah, because like when we were doing the fucking what is it, the Renapan, I was like, all right, I'm just gonna fucking like blitz through this real quick, and I was like reading like incredibly fast through it, because that's normally how I read. So I would just be like I would not even be listening to the entire like VN. I would just be reading it quickly myself. But I like to get immersed, and just go at it slowly, to provide, of course, to set the mood and provide a nice viewing experience for anyone who's listening in as well. Because I mean, if I'm just like, I can't believe that they're doing this, what the fuck is going on, right? Like just reading really quickly would be kind of bad for as a streamer. I would not be doing my job entertaining if I was just blitzing through the text and not letting you get immersed as the viewer or listener. But yeah, what about you, Nadia? Any thoughts on the first arc, or back when you played it for the first time?
The syringe was what stood out to me the most when I read it first. And like I desperately wanted to know what happened, so I started Watanagashi right away, the same day that I had finished Onikakushi.
Mhm.
And in the second subchapter of Watanagashi, my CPU died. Like I had to get a new laptop.
Hmm. I
So
remember this
it
actually.
Oh
yeah,
God.
that was horrible. That was it felt like I was just stuck like it was the middle of the semester. So
Mhm.
that was probably the more important part, but like I wanted to know what happened and I didn't have a computer to do it.
Your plug
Um
not answering, and you want your crack.
yeah, yeah, something like that. Yeah, I feel like when I looking back, because I have only heard what other people have thought while they're playing the game. I haven't really looked at a summary since I read it. I mean, I didn't look
Mhm.
at a summary when I read it. I was reading it. But some of the details, there's a lot more in Onikakushi than I remember.
Mhm.
And I think the further you get, you'll come back to this chapter and your notes and remember some things.
Right. Because because I have like I talked about this again last night on stream, where whenever you analyze a work, there's multiple levels to it, and I've got the surface level analysis like in my head as the like default, right? Like I can remember like everything that happens on the surface, and it's unless I rewind the tape in my mind and go back to specific chapters, I will not remember certain specific things unless it's brought up again. But I'm pretty
Right.
sure that again, that's what this guy wants you to do. That's what, of course, the author constantly wants you to do. They'll mention something and they'll be like, if you weren't playing these games back to back, well, that sucks for you. And if you're playing this in 2002, you had to wait until the next comic hit or whatever to get the next game.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember I always tell people to play them back to back.
Yeah.
But then I have to remember that like it's not like it was intended to be played that way. They were
Mhm.
coming out so, like
Every six
spread far
months.
apart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm pretty sure people that did that, they're like, all right, well, Comic Hit's coming up. Let me replay part one again. Because Higurashi's going to be there probably. And then they would I mean, if you're a Japanese man in like 2002, that's probably what happened, right? So they would probably replay the first part and they're like, oh yeah, all this shit happened. Then they get to part two, they're like, yo, all this is going on. This answers this, or it's more crumbs, and they're licking the floor. Uh, so that's what I'm assuming would happen. And,
Yeah, I would say that probably the next 30 hours for you will just be crumbs.
Yeah.
so the next game, all right. It's not until part three, until once I get past that like the boring start or whatever that you mentioned, that it's like it takes forever, but once it gets going, it gets going.
I wouldn't even say that it's boring. It's just the front half of
Mhm.
Onikakushi in particular is very like it's just front loaded with slice of life, which
Mm.
for the people that have heard that it's a murder mystery story, that it kind of makes them bounce off of it sometimes. So it's just
Yeah.
something that like if you're aware of it, it's I feel like it's a little easier to get into.
I mean, I didn't really mind it.
Yeah.
Also, hey Mina, we're kind of wrapping up, but thanks for stopping by. Like I said, the characters are so well written in the first game that I didn't care that like the entire the first 5 chapters, it's just all slice of life. It was just world building and a ton of slice of life. Like mind you, you could have just been like, oh, we played a card game today. It was a lot of fun. It was pretty cool, and then I went home. Right? It could have just been that, but instead they're like, no, here's the entire card game.
Yep.
And it's like, all right, no, that's great. Even if 3 has that, I don't mind. It's pretty interesting. So yeah, thanks so much for I guess kind of not recommending it, but just kind of like bringing it up and me being like, you know what, I should check that out for the spooky season. So I'm gonna try to at least get through the first 3 chapters this year, because they're gonna take a while, especially at the rate that I'm going. I guess we're just doing a fucking Higurashi marathon at this point. Especially if it gets its hooks deep within my fucking skin, that I have to like keep going to like try to find out what the answer is, and then I'm like Keiichi throwing up in a fucking booth. Because I think the one of the last thoughts that I had was specifically regarding that booth scene. When Oishi-san is like, oh, he said I'm sorry. I think that's when Keiichi, it finally clicked in his fucking head. Ah, fuck. Rena was saying I'm sorry in the rain. And because of that, she mentioned something. He was told at some point that if you don't apologize to Oyashiro-san, if you don't apologize and embrace him, bad stuff will happen to you. And that's why the final things that Keiichi was saying before he, or as he was clawing his throat out, was, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, like over and over and over again. But I guess he didn't mean it hard enough because he fucking like dies. He bites the dust like a fucking loser. So if he would have, you know, forgiven, if he would have been honest about it, Oyashiro-sama might have been like, okay, you know what, the drug won't work on you. Or I won't possess your mind and force you to claw your throat out.
Who knows? I've never played this game before, so I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
I just moved here.
Yeah, I watched. I played this game. I watched the full like playthrough on YouTube at 2x speed. I did the same thing with Persona 3, 4, and 5. That's what happens on. That's what everyone does. I played the game.
100%.
But all
All
right.
right. Well, it is. It's after 10, so I've got to get going.
Yeah. So I do want to thank you both for joining me tonight for this. Even though it was kind of spur of the moment, especially like last week. But I do want to thank you so much for your time specifically. On a Tuesday of all things. But yeah, hopefully you guys had fun talking about this.
Yeah, it was good to reminisce. I'm deep in Umineko now, and I just like getting to reminisce about a lot of the early stuff in Higurashi was nice.
That's good. That's good. So hopefully we can do this again for chapter 2, and if so, well, we'll get in touch and we'll work it out.
Hell yeah.
All right. Thanks so much for joining me tonight, both of you, Billy and Nadia. I don't know if you guys have any final things you want to say or anything.
I'm just looking forward to you starting Onikakushi.
Yeah, same here.
Okay. Well, that'll be Thursday at 7 Central, more than likely. So hopefully I'll see you guys there. But all right.
All right, bye stream.
Yeah. See you guys. I mean, I'll still do my wrap up, but yeah. I'll talk to you guys later.
Talk to you later.
All right. Bye.
All right. See ya.